Massive stone blocks locked together without mortar, perfectly aligned corridors tracking celestial events. Foundations engineered with precision that rivals modern standards. Across the ancient world, monumental architecture appears not primitive, but calculated, deliberate in geometry, scale, and placement. Archaeologists can measure the angles and date the layers, yet intention remains harder to define. Why were such complex techniques mastered so early? How were multi-ton stones transported, lifted, and fitted with near-flawless accuracy? And why do similar structural principles emerge in cultures separated by vast distances? These ancient architectural mysteries are not legends, they are physical measurable anomalies still standing in stone. Engaruka irrigation ruins on the semi-arid floor of northern Tanzania's Rift Valley near Lake Natron feels like a paradox carved into stone. The landscape looks dry and unforgiving today, yet scattered across it lies one of East Africa's most extensive abandoned irrigation and terrace systems, evidence that a farming community once turned seasonal water into reliable harvests at a scale that still looks too big to be accidental. Archaeologists and geoarchaeologists describe Engaruka as the largest abandoned, irrigated, and terraced landscape in East Africa, and what survives is not a single monument, but a whole engineered countryside, stone-bounded fields, canals, check dams, and settlement terraces overlooking the field system. The mystery begins with the sheer footprint. Modern syntheses often reference a cultivated landscape on the order of about 1,000 hectares, while technical work shows that parts of the system functioned as enormous alluvial sediment traps and water management features, more than 1,000 hectares of them, built to capture fine silts and clays and control inundation. In places, those trapped deposits accumulated to depths greater than 2 meters. In other words, Engaruka was not merely irrigating crops, it was also farming the river's sediment, deliberately building soils where soils were scarce. That combination, water control plus engineered soil creation, pushes Engaruka into the same global conversation as the Inca terraces of the Andes or the Hohokam Canal networks of the Sonoran Desert, large-scale agronomy that only works if people can coordinate labor maintenance and rules for sharing water. But unlike those better documented cases, Engaruka left no written manual, no clear political inscription, and no single signature that tells us who commanded the system or how conflicts were settled. The infrastructure is loud, the governance is silent. The second layer of ancient mystery is time. How long did this engineered landscape live, and when did it empty out? Research that pulls together radiocarbon dating, stratigraphy, and regional history increasingly frames Engaruka as a late Iron Age farming economy that began around the late 14th or early 15th century and was abandoned around the mid to late 18th century, roughly 3 to 4 centuries of occupation and cultivation. That alone is unsettling. A system that complicated does not read like a short-lived experiment. It suggests generational knowledge, how to cut canals at stable gradients, how to rebuild walls after floods, how to prevent sediment from choking channels, and how to rotate or manage fields under highly variable rainfall. Recent archaeology has also challenged an older, simpler story that Engaruka was forced into irrigation because farming would otherwise be impossible. Geoarchaeological analysis indicates that parts of the site flooded with sufficient regularity for cultivation and soil building, with some fields even showing paddy-like inundation conditions at certain times. The system appears to have adapted and changed through time rather than collapsing immediately at the first climatic stress. This reframes the puzzle. If Engaruka's farmers had resilience strategies. Why did the place still end up abandoned? Climate shifts, trade route changes, regional migration and conflict disease, soil depletion, and breakdowns in water-sharing institutions have all been proposed as contributors, but the evidence points to a more complicated, slow unraveling than a single doomsday event. The ruins, therefore, sit in that compelling archaeological category where we can measure the engineering estimate, the time frame, and even reconstruct aspects of water and sediment management, yet we still cannot name a definitive cause of abandonment, because the decisive social triggers, politics, conflict, leadership rules, are exactly what rarely fossilize. A third mystery comes from the research history itself. Engaruka has been known to archaeology for decades, but each wave of investigation has shifted the interpretation as if the site keeps refusing a final verdict. Early professional attention and excavation began in the 1960s, including a first season of excavations reported in 1964, and later work repeatedly returned because the obvious explanation never fully fit was this: a vanished intensive civilization, a cautionary tale of environmental mismanagement, or a sophisticated adaptation that only became vulnerable when outside pressures changed. By the early 2000s, fieldwork was explicitly trying to correct a major imbalance in earlier research: too much focus on habitation terraces and enclosures, not enough direct excavation of the field and irrigation structures themselves, because you cannot explain abandonment if you have never properly dated and sampled the agricultural engineering. That push led to targeted work on the irrigation and field systems, not just the settlements, and to newer lab-heavy methods: soil micromorphology, geochemistry, and stratigraphic sampling that can read water presence, sediment movement, and cultivation signals from thin sections of soil like a micro-archive. This matters for ancient mystery storytelling because it shows how Engaruka's enigma is not romantic fog. It is a live scientific problem. The site demands better direct dating of fields, better correlation with paleoclimate records, and better modeling of how institutions might have managed water rights at scale. And that is where Engaruka becomes uniquely eerie. You can stand among low stone walls and follow canals across the plain, tracing the logic of a lost system. Yet the crucial human layer, names, rules, disputes, the final decision to leave, has been erased so cleanly that even 3 to 4 centuries of success end in silence. In the end, Engaruka is less a ruin than a question mark, written across 1,000 hectares. How did a pre-colonial community in the Rift Valley build a landscape engineering project comparable in organizational demands to famous terrace and canal societies elsewhere? And why did that knowledge, so effective for generations, fail to remain anchored in place? If you stand on the perfectly flat Mesopotamian plain and look toward Borsippa, you're not just looking at another ruin, you're looking at a question mark made of brick. The site lies about 17.7 kilometers southwest of Babylon, on the Euphrates' eastern side, close enough to be Babylon's little sister, yet strange enough to earn its own legends. In later Arabic tradition, it was even linked to the Tower of Babel, partly because a stele and royal texts preserve Nebuchadnezzar's proud language about a tower at Borsippa, words that sound like a memory of something meant to challenge the sky. Modern scholarship, however, treats the Ziggurat here as what it always officially was: a massive religious monument tied to Nabu and the temple complex Izida, not a biblical prop. That tension between legend and administrative reality is the first mystery layer. Why did Borsippa become a stronger Babel candidate in popular imagination than the actual Babylonian tower, whose foundations sit in Babylon itself? The second layer is the base itself, because the temple base at Borsippa is not simply a platform. Excavations and architectural study concluded that the ziggurat had a 60 by 60 meter core made of unbaked mud brick, later enlarged to about 78 by 78 meters by a mantle of baked brick. The outer layer was bonded with bitumen, and the builders used reeds, ropes, and wooden beams to stitch layers together. On paper, it sounds like crude materials. In practice, it reads like an ancient engineering recipe for resisting moisture settling and shear forces on a soft alluvial plain. Compare it to many later stone monuments. Borsippa's technology isn't about hardness, it's about system design, a composite structure layered, bound, sealed, and reinforced. And that raises a quiet but unsettling question: how much of Mesopotamian lost know-how is hiding in plain sight because we mistake mud brick for simplicity? Then comes the scale. When Nebuchadnezzar II's rebuilding was complete, the ziggurat reportedly reached about 70 meters in 7 terraces, and even as a ruin, it still rises roughly 52 meters above the flat landscape. One reason it remains among the most visually unmistakable ziggurat silhouettes in Iraq. 7 terraces matter because the number repeats in a much more famous comparison. Itimenanki at Babylon, often associated with the Tower of Babel tradition, is described in later cuneiform tradition as having 7 terraces too, with a base about 91 times 91 meters and a total height around 91 meters. Put bluntly, if Babylon's tower was the world capital version, Borsippa looks like the intentional counterpart, smaller but still enormous, and designed within the same cosmic vocabulary of layered ascent. That parallel fuels one of Borsippa's oldest mysteries. Was the Borsippa Tower deliberately built as an echo of Babylon's, almost like a ritual mirror, 2 stairways toward heaven, one for Marduk's city and one for Nabu's? The 4th layer is the text, and it is eerie. A Nebuchadnezzar inscription connected with Borsippa describes restoring Nabu's sanctuary as a kind of cosmic machine, the Temple of the 7 Spheres, and it boasts of construction with bricks of noble lapis lazuli, which scholars commonly interpret as blue-glazed bricks meant to imitate lapis. In other words, the tower may have been designed to look like a stacked slice of sky-blue brilliance, crowning a man-made mountain of brick. But here's the mystery: we can read the words and we can find traces of glazing traditions, yet we cannot fully reconstruct the sensory reality, how intensely it reflected sunlight, how it looked from miles away, how the color symbolism shaped ritual experience. The ancient text is not merely decoration, it is a blueprint for an emotional effect that archaeology can only partly recover. The 5th layer is the one that turns the base into a sealed time capsule. Austrian archaeologists concluded that Nebuchadnezzar's ziggurat encased the ruins of a smaller tower from the 2nd millennium BC. That means the most important architectural evidence may literally be inside the later monument, buried behind the Neo-Babylonian skin. It's like discovering a cathedral built around an older shrine, except the older structure is trapped inside a gigantic brick shell. The mystery here is methodological as much as historical. How do you prove and map what's entombed within, without destroying the very thing you're studying? Modern approaches, non-invasive survey, careful trenching, and even ground-penetrating radar tests, one reported over a 130 by 90 meter area, hint at answers, but they also remind us that the deepest base secrets may remain inaccessible for ethical reasons. Next comes the violence done to the evidence by time and by humans. After early excavations, looters in the 1890s removed about 2,000 cuneiform tablets, many tied to Izida. Later, a large group of roughly 2,000 tablets surfaced through the market and was sold to the British Museum. In 1894 to 1900, and many more texts from Borsippa's scholarly culture circulated without secure archaeological context. This is one of the cruelest mysteries in Near Eastern archaeology. Borsippa was famous for legal, administrative, and even astronomical scholarship, yet the archive that could explain daily ritual logistics and temple economics was shredded by the antiquities trade. We have the words, but too often we've lost the where, and without where, chronology and function become guesses. Finally, there is the mystery of what happened after the glory. The Ziggurat was found to have been partially hollowed out in Parthian times, not a poetic collapse, but a human-made wound. Was it brick robbing for new buildings, treasure hunting, military reuse, or something ritual? The voids distort the structure and scramble the story the base could have told about load repairs and failure. And yet, paradoxically, those later intrusions prove continuity. The site remained meaningful enough to be entered, altered, and reused centuries after the Neo-Babylonian Empire. That continuity is reinforced by the Antiochus Cylinder Seleucid period, which summarizes restoration work at Izida and shows that later rulers still sought legitimacy through Babylonian-style building piety. In Borsippa, the end never fully arrives, only renovations, rebrandings, and new layers of memory. The excavation history itself reads like a clue trail. Work is recorded under Henry Creswick Rawlinson in 1854 with the recovery of Nebuchadnezzar II foundation prisms. Hormuzd Rassam excavated 1879 to 1881, primarily at Izida. Robert Kondoa worked in 1902 while leading the major Babylon excavations, and an Austrian team excavated 16 seasons between 1980 and 2003, focusing first on the Great Ziggurat and later on the Nabu Temple complex. After a long pause, Austrian research reportedly resumed again in the 2020s, reflecting a modern shift from heroic digging to mapping the entire urban fabric around the monument, trying to understand the city that fed the tower. In other words, the temple base mystery is not just how was it built, but what kind of society keeps rebuilding a stairway to the heavens for 2,000 years. If you stand on the gentle hill in Migori County where Thimlich Ohinga lies, the first thing that feels wrong in the best ancient mystery way is how confidently the stone walls still hold their shape, without mortar, without dressed blocks, without the kind of monumental state power we usually associate with large stone architecture. Thimlich Ohinga is the best preserved and largest of the Ohingni dry stone enclosed settlements in the Lake Victoria Basin, and the nominated property covers about 21 hectares, with a buffer zone of about 33 hectares, a scale that already suggests something beyond a simple family homestead. The site's engineering reads like a coded manual. The walls are built in a three-phase design, an outer and inner face of larger stones locked by a middle packing of smaller stones, creating an interlocking stability that survives centuries of rain heat, plant roots, and ground movement. UNESCO describes the walls as typically about 1 meter thick and between about 1.5 and 4.5 meters high, with retained stretches up to around 4.2 meters, still visible numbers that matter because they put the structure closer to a defensible compound than a casual fence. The main enclosure, often referenced as Ko-Chieng/Ko-Chieng, is described as roughly 140 meters in diameter, north to south, with 3 gateways, 1 west, 2 east, shaped as passage-type doors rather than broad openings, as if the builders wanted movement controlled, not welcoming. Inside, the mystery deepens. There are corridors lined by low walls, cattle kraals or pens, and circular house depressions that average around 5 meters in diameter, implying a planned internal grammar where livestock storage work and people each had assigned space. There is even a designated industrial zone, including evidence of ironworking, furnace area indicators, tuyere fragments, and slag, meaning this was not only a place to hide, but a place to produce. So what is the ancient enigma? It begins with the simplest question: who built it? Thimlich Ohinga sits in a region shaped by long migration and interaction among communities, and the site's own story appears to be one of successive occupations by different groups over time, rather than a single founder civilization. That makes the identity of the original builders hard to pin down in the way YouTube myths often want. The name itself is a clue to later cultural layers. National Museums of Kenya explains that Thimlich Ohinga in Dholuo can be understood as referring to a frightening, dense forest and a large fortified enclosure, language that reflects how local memory interpreted the place after it already existed. The archaeological narrative, however, refuses to become a single tribe legend. Even UNESCO's framing emphasizes that the site documents multiple groups and linguistic origins in the basin across centuries, and that the settlement pattern reflects pastoral community organization rather than a centralized kingdom. In other words, the walls may be stone, but the identity behind them is fluid, exactly the kind of ambiguity that keeps the mystery alive. Then comes the next riddle: how old is it really? Popular descriptions often throw out a neat 15th century tag, but the evidence is messier in a way that is far more interesting. Charcoal samples recovered from excavations produced radiocarbon determinations reported as 110 plus or minus 80 BP and 200 plus or minus 80 BP, which once calibrated span a broad possible range roughly circa 1650 to 1900 CE. That does not mean the walls were first built in 1650. It means the dated charcoal relates to events, fires, occupation activity, captured in the sampled contexts. The mystery gap between construction and dated occupation is one of the most powerful story engines here. The stone architecture could be earlier, while the datable traces we recover may cluster in later phases of use, repair, and reuse. This is reinforced by the broader UNESCO interpretation that the Thimlich Ohinga tradition reflects pastoral communities in the region from roughly the 16th century to the mid-20th century, which also aligns with the idea of long continuity, not a single short occupation. Archaeology adds another unsettling twist. Even in a landscape where many similar stone enclosures exist, research has historically been uneven. A study discussing the archaeology of southwestern Kenya notes that among these structures, only Thimlich Ohinga had been excavated with artifacts, including ceramics, fauna beads, and other materials, while many other related sites had not seen comparable excavation, meaning our big picture is still incomplete. When data is uneven, mysteries multiply. Patterns that might be obvious across dozens of excavated sites remain hidden, because we simply do not have the same depth of material evidence everywhere. Thimlich Ohinga becomes both a key and a trap, our most studied example, but also the lens that can distort what the wider tradition really was. And then there is the architectural question that feels almost like a locked room puzzle. Why this particular stone technology here? UNESCO's evaluation explicitly compares Thimlich Ohinga to dry stone traditions across Africa. Examples in Zimbabwe, Sudan, Ethiopia, Botswana, South Africa, and even West Africa, yet stresses that Thimlich Ohinga stands out as the best preserved complex within its region, and that its social form is more consistent with lineage-based pastoral structures than the hierarchical signatures associated with capital sites like those linked to the Zimbabwe and Mutapa spheres. This matters for mystery storytelling because it undercuts the lazy lost empire trope while still leaving us with something astonishing. A community without a stone palace state still built walls that behave like engineered fortifications. The technique is sophisticated, but the social explanation is not a simple "king ordered it." That tension, advanced, build, non-imperial context is exactly where ancient mysteries thrive. Finally, there is the question of purpose, which is never just one thing. UNESCO notes the Ohinga appear to have served primarily as security for communities and livestock, while also defining social units and relationships. The internal layout, central kraals, controlled gateways, corridors, supports the idea of defense against threats such as raids, conflict, or wildlife, but it also reads like a blueprint for managing communal life, separating animals, food preparation, storage, craft activity, and household space in a tight, regulated environment. That dual function is the site's quiet secret. Thimlich Ohinga is not merely a fort and not merely a village. It is a stone-built social machine. So the ancient mystery narrative of Thimlich Ohinga is not aliens or impossible technology. It is more chilling than that, a real place where the stones prove that complex planning, engineering knowledge, and communal organization can emerge outside the familiar textbook centers of pyramids, emperors, or written chronicles. The walls, up to around 4.5 meters high, about a meter thick, built in a 3-phase interlocking system, enclosing a landscape counted in hectares with a main enclosure roughly 140 meters across, and radiocarbon signals tied to occupation spanning roughly 1650 to 1900 CE, do not answer the mystery. They define it. Thimlich Ohinga leaves us with a final haunting question that archaeology has not fully closed in the centuries when mobility pressure and conflict reshaped the Lake Victoria Basin. How many other stone cities like this once existed, built by communities whose names changed, merged and vanished, while only their silent geometry remained? Kondoa Irangi rock shelters in central Tanzania look at first glance like just prehistoric paintings on stone, but the deeper you go, the more they behave like an unsolved archive, one that refuses to sit neatly in a single time period, a single people, or a single interpretation. Inside the wider UNESCO-listed Kondoa rock art sites, researchers estimate anywhere from about 150 to 450 decorated shelters and painted surfaces across the escarpment landscape, and even UNESCO notes the uncomfortable truth: the area has never been comprehensively surveyed, with older records scattered across different institutions and countries, which means the master catalogue of what exists and what has been lost is still incomplete. That gap in documentation is not a minor bureaucratic problem. It is the first big mystery, because without a unified survey, you cannot confidently say how many panels belong to which era, which style came first, or whether the most famous motifs are typical or rare exceptions. In other words, Kondoa Irangi is not a single site with a single story. It is a landscape-sized puzzle with missing pieces. The second mystery is age. People often want rock art to be neatly Ice Age or Iron Age, but Kondoa breaks that craving for a single date. Archaeology from Kaisiji II rock shelter, one of the best-studied shelters in the same Kondoa heritage region, preserves a sediment sequence at least 6 meters thick, spanning roughly 47,000 to 4,000 calibrated years before present, based on dozens of radiocarbon dates on ostrich eggshell material, making it one of East Africa's stronger chronological records for the Middle Stone Age to later Stone Age transition. Yet the visible paintings at Kaises II and by extension many shelters in the region, do not automatically date to the earliest occupations. Even within the same rock shelter, the act of painting can be much later than the earliest floor deposits. Tryon and colleagues point out that a painted slab found in the deposit has a reasonable maximum age estimate around 4,000 years, depending on context, which is a stark reminder that humans lived here 40,000 plus years ago does not necessarily mean these specific images are 40,000 years old. That tension between deep human time and the much later moments when paint was actually laid on stone is exactly where Kondoa Irangi stays mysterious, because the public sees one thing pictures while the ground beneath preserves another occupation's burials, beads, tools, ochre use. The third mystery is authorship. A major study that systematically recorded Kondoa's rock art documented 204 sites and 3,175 individual paintings, already more than half of what earlier projections expected, and argued that there are at least 3 distinct traditions, often summarized as naturalistic white and cattle traditions that likely relate to different communities and lifeways, from hunter-gatherers to agro-pastoralists to later mobile pastoralists. But even with that scale of data, scholars still warn that after nearly a century of research, there is neither a broadly agreed stylistic sequence nor a universally accepted ascription of authorship for the whole area. Kondoa Irangi therefore becomes a rare place where more research has not simply narrowed uncertainty, it has mapped how complex the uncertainty really is. Some paintings appear to echo hunting and wild fauna. Others emphasize cattle and pastoral identity. Others rely on white pigments and motifs that do not read as literal scenes at all. When you compare Kondoa to famous cave art icons like Lascaux or Altamira, the contrast is instructive. Those European sites are often presented as self-contained chambers with a relatively tight narrative of discovery and conservation, while Kondoa is an open landscape of hundreds of shelters that remained part of local life rather than being sealed away. That openness is a blessing for cultural continuity, but it also complicates archaeological certainty. The fourth mystery is meaning. Even early observers noticed that certain scenes don't behave like simple hunting depictions, postures, pairings, and abstracted bodies can feel ceremonial or symbolic rather than practical. And if meaning is symbolic, then translation becomes dangerous. A sun-like circle or a human figure with concentric forms might be a story marker, a clan sign, a trance/ritual reference, a mnemonic for a chant, or something we no longer have the cultural key to unlock. In southern Africa's San Rock art, for example, modern ethnography helped link some imagery to trance and ritual. Kondoa tempts the same approach, but researchers explicitly caution that present-day practices and identities may be the product of long cultural contact and change, so modern analogies can illuminate while also misleading. That is the fifth mystery. Kondoa's rock shelters are not only ancient, many remain embedded in living traditions and ritual use, which creates a paradox for interpretation. Living use can preserve memory of sacred places, but it can also overwrite older meanings or blend multiple histories into one modern explanation. The sixth mystery is technological. How did these pigments last? And what exactly were they made of? Kisses II's archaeological layers show recurrent use of red ochre across long spans of time, confirming that mineral colorants were part of local behavior and material culture for tens of thousands of years. But ochre present in deposits is not the same as knowing the recipe of rock paint on walls, whether binders were plant-based, fat-based, or something else. how surfaces were prepared, why some motifs endure while others fade, and how microclimate smoke dust and water flow inside shelters altered the chemistry over centuries. Here, comparison helps again at sites like Tassili Najer in the Sahara. Climate shifts and exposure transformed preservation conditions dramatically. Kondoa's shelters sit in an environment where woodland cover can protect panels by moderating sun, wind, and dust, which UNESCO specifically describes as protective, meaning that ecological change is not just background scenery, but an active variable in whether the art survives. And that leads to the seventh mystery, the one happening right now, what has already been lost. UNESCO reports threats from village land use practices such as farming, grazing, and resource harvesting encroaching around sites, and it bluntly notes that a large number of sites were illegally excavated before inscription, causing a loss of contextual material, the kind of loss that is irreversible because it destroys the association between artifacts, sediments, and painted surfaces that could help date and interpret them. Kondoa was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2006, but the inscription date is not the end of the story. It is, in a way, the moment the world officially admitted the archive is globally significant, while still not fully decoded. If you want one cold documentary-style takeaway for ancient mystery content, it is this: Kondoa Irangi is not mysterious because it is unknown. It is mysterious because it is known in fragments. We have numbers, hundreds of shelters, thousands of motifs, a recorded corpus of 204 sites, and 3,175 paintings. We have a hard archaeological timeline beneath at least some shelters, reaching back 47,000 years, with renewed scientific dating programs that built robust chronologies from museum collections and field records. We have a research history stretching from early 20th century reports of paintings through mid-century excavations. Cassis II was excavated in the 1930s and expanded in 1956, to modern re-analyses and systematic recording projects. Yet the central question still refuses to die: which images belong to which people, which centuries, and which purposes? Storytelling, ritual, identity marking, territorial memory, or something we no longer even know how to name. That is why Kondoa Irangi works so well for ancient mystery storytelling. It is an enormous, evidence-rich case file where the facts keep expanding, but the final translation remains just out of reach. If you arrive at Qohaito expecting a single ruin to pose for the camera, you'll miss the point. The real monument is the plateau itself, because here the ancient builders didn't just construct on the land, they tried to make the land behave. Qohaito, often written Qohaito/Qohaito in southern Eritrea, sits on a high, exposed tableland about 2,600 to 2,700 meters above sea level, framed by seasonal valleys, wadis, and edged by steep escarpments. UNESCO's tentative listing describes a plateau roughly 16 kilometers long, narrowing in places to about 400 meters, covering about 32 square kilometers, with an escarpment perimeter around 84 kilometers. Those numbers matter because the mystery here isn't a single temple or inscription, it's landscape-scale engineering. How do you keep soil, crops, and people alive in a place where water arrives in brief, violent pulses and then vanishes into wind and stone? The answer seems to be a stone terrace system that behaves less like scenery and more like infrastructure, retaining walls to slow erosion. The slopes trap sediment and stretch the useful life of each rain event, paired with basins and barriers that harvest runoff instead of chasing rivers. The most iconic piece of that water logic is the structure commonly called the Safira Sahira Dam, but the deeper you read, the less comfortable that word becomes. A Cambridge-hosted academic synthesis of Axumite water management describes Saphira as a square basin about 67 meters long, roughly 3 meters high at its center, with natural borders on 3 sides and a built downstream wall of regularly coursed, fitted blocks with rough stone steps, features that make it look like rainfall/runoff storage as much as a classic river-blocking dam. That same discussion notes early descriptions emphasizing its resemblance to the famous Marib Dam in highland Yemen, a comparison that has fueled a long-running suspicion that ideas crossed the Red Sea and were reinterpreted in Eritrea's highlands. Yet the structure also sits comfortably beside highland Ethiopian/Eritrean strategies of seasonal water capture associated with Axum and its hinterlands, so Saphira refuses to choose a single identity. It can look Yemen-like in concept while reading Highland local in masonry and placement. This is where Qohaito becomes truly ancient mysterious. In a sober, evidence-based way, you can measure the stones, but the manual for the whole system, how terraces, basins, channels, and fields were connected, timed, maintained, and expanded, has been partially erased. Even heritage planning documents admit that key elements may be hidden beneath soil and collapse, explicitly recommending non-invasive prospection, such as ground-penetrating radar GPR/georadar magnetometer and electromagnetic methods to detect buried traces of terracing and hydraulic works. In other words, what you see on the surface may be only the surviving skeleton of a much larger machine. The archaeology history itself adds another layer of intrigue. Qohaito was noticed by outsiders in the 19th century, and early descriptions sometimes misread what they found, then returned to repeatedly as a place that is obviously important but surprisingly under-resolved. General syntheses record that Clements Markham reported the ruins in 1868, and later observers continued documenting the plateau's major features, but even modern summaries still emphasize how limited excavation has been, noting that as of 2011, the stone ruins had not yet been excavated in a comprehensive way. What did happen crucially were documentation campaigns. An Eritrean heritage case study report states that an overall survey produced a preliminary archaeological map of the Qohaito Plateau meant to capture the present state of known remains as a foundation for protection and future research. The site management plan also preserves a paper trail of late 1990s fieldwork and reporting by the German Archaeological Mission to Eritrea Game, listing preliminary survey and season reports from 1996 and related documentation evidence that systematic recording was underway even if deep excavation remained limited. This combination, big landscape, partial exposure, heavy reliance on survey, creates the perfect conditions for unanswered questions that are technical rather than supernatural. Were the terraces built in a single ambitious push, or do they represent multiple phases of repair and expansion across pre-Axumite and Axumite centuries? UNESCO's tentative listing frames Qohaito as a cultural landscape with long development and dense archaeological scattering, implying a deep timeline rather than a one-generation project. If terraces were rebuilt repeatedly, then today's walls may be the newest skin on an older core, and only stratigraphy, sediment sampling, and targeted excavation can separate one phase from another. Comparisons sharpen the mystery. The Andes prove terraces can create microclimates and stabilize steep agriculture at altitude. Nabatean runoff systems show how arid societies can farm by capturing brief floods and channeling them into fields. Marib in Yemen shows how water control can become a civilizational keystone. Qohaito seems to sit at the intersection of all three ideas: highland altitude, runoff harvesting, and a Red Sea corridor where knowledge could travel, yet it still resists being reduced to any one model. And there is a final riddle that keeps returning like a shadow over the stonework. If the plateau was engineered so carefully, why did the system quiet down? If settlement and farming here depended on constant maintenance, clearing channels, rebuilding, retaining walls, dredging basins, then any shock to labor governance, trade routes, or rainfall rhythms could have set off a slow failure that looks to us like abandonment. But without a dated sequence for terrace phases and water installations, that remains hypothesis, not conclusion. The next decisive step is simple to describe and hard to execute. Map the terraces and basins as one hydraulic network, sample their sediments and mortars, and build a phase timeline. Using the kind of geophysics and targeted excavation the management plan already points toward. Until that happens, every neat label, Yemenite, Axumite, dam cistern, stays provisional. And Qohaito remains what it is today, a plateau-sized machine of stone that undeniably worked well enough to justify its scale, yet still refuses to give up its operating instructions. Manda Islands ruins, especially Manda Town, often called Manda Old Town, and the nearby Takwa ruins feel like a missing chapter from the Swahili coast. You can still read the outlines of mosques, houses, tombs, and coral stone walls, yet the biggest questions stay stubbornly unanswered. The mystery starts with timing. Manda is repeatedly described as a prosperous port already by the 9th century, meaning it belongs to that early wave of Swahili urbanism when coastal communities began turning trade, religion, and architecture into a new kind of city life on the Indian Ocean rim. If you compare it to Shangapate Island, often discussed as one of the earliest well-documented Swahili towns, Manda becomes a shadow twin. Both sit in the Lamu archipelago region and both signal early urban growth, but Manda's story is harder to pin down because the site was disturbed, reused, and partially eroded, leaving archaeologists with fragments that can be dated but not always explained. The second mystery is how quickly Manda looks global. Swahili towns were never isolated villages that slowly discovered the sea. They were ports that learned to speak the logic of monsoon trade. By the time Manda was flourishing, objects arriving from far beyond East Africa, ceramics, glass items, and other imported goods used for status and exchange were already part of its material world. That matters because it challenges the lazy idea that the Swahili coast only became connected later. In the same way, Kilwa in the far south eventually became famous as a commercial powerhouse. Manda hints that northern networks were also sophisticated early on. Yet the route map is still debated. Which commodities, which partners, and which seasonal circuits mattered most at different moments. When archaeologists date layers by the imported wares, they find they're not only building a timeline, they're trying to reconstruct invisible shipping lanes. This is where the excavation history becomes part of the mystery itself. The earliest systematic work at Manda is tied to Neville Chittick, whose investigations in the 1960s helped establish a baseline chronology for the town and its coral-built structures. In a way, Chittick's trenches are like a first flashlight beam in a dark room. They reveal enough to prove a city existed, but not enough to show every corner. Later projects and renewed interest, such as heritage and archaeology initiatives focused on Manda Old Town, build on that foundation, asking sharper questions about urban layout, daily life, and the precise sequencing of building phases. The key point for a mystery narrative is this: Manda's layers don't behave like a neat history book. They behave like a port rebuilt, repurposed, interrupted, revived. Takwa adds a different kind of enigma, a compact town whose ruins are strikingly readable, yet whose final collapse still feels like a cautionary tale with missing pages. The site is described as being abandoned in the 17th century, linked to salinization of fresh water and persistent conflict, often framed as fighting with people associated with pate. That explanation is plausible. Fresh water is destiny on small coral islands, but it also raises a sharper question: why would a trading settlement with maritime connections fail to solve a water problem through well systems, rain capture, or political alliances? Did the town's economy shrink first, making infrastructure maintenance impossible? Did violence disrupt labor and agriculture? Or did environmental change move faster than adaptation? Even the official heritage description folds the end into a simple chain of cause and effect. But archaeology often reveals that collapses are multi-causal and slow, until suddenly they aren't. Architecture is where the ancient tech vibe becomes tangible. Both Manda and Takwa are built largely from coral ragstone/limestone, the classic Swahili coastal material, easy to quarry, workable when fresh, and then astonishingly durable once cured. Visitors still see defensive walls with openings for watch and control, and religious buildings oriented toward prayer. The mystery isn't how did they stack stones, it's why the style looks simultaneously local and oceanic. Coral construction appears across the Swahili world, from the Lamu region down toward Tanzania. Yet each town tweaks the formula. Layouts, mosques, tomb designs, and decorative habits differ like dialects of the same architectural language. Compare this to places like Geita further south in Kenya, where monumental stone ruins also survive. Geita's later, more centralized stone cityscape often feels like a grand enclosed statement. Takwa feels like a smaller community, whose sacred spaces and tombs carry intense meaning even without huge scale. Manda, meanwhile, sits somewhere in between, urban enough to matter, but fragmentary enough to keep refusing a single interpretation. Then there's the most modern, unsettling evidence that loops back into the ancient story, ancient DNA. A major 2023 Nature study analyzed DNA from 80 individuals from several medieval and early modern Swahili coast towns dated roughly AD 1250 to 1800. Showing strongly entwined African and Asian ancestry patterns across the coast. This does not solve Manda, but it changes the kind of question you ask at Manda. If coastal towns were biologically and socially mixed in measurable ways, then the old argument were Swahili cities, African or foreign-made, starts to look like the wrong framing. The harder mystery becomes, how did identity work in port cities, where language, religion, marriage, trade, and power all crossed oceans? Manda's ruins are perfect for that question, because they sit in a region historically linked to early Islamization and Indian Ocean exchange, yet they also sit among African hinterland networks that supplied goods and people. The stones are coastal. The story is continental and maritime at once. It began, as many great mysteries do, not in a laboratory, but in secrecy. In the year 1933, during the Japanese occupation of northern China, a group of laborers working on a bridge across the Songhua River in Heilongjiang province unearthed something extraordinary: a massive, human-like skull, astonishingly well-preserved, and unlike anything they had ever seen. One worker, realizing its potential significance, chose not to report it. Instead, fearing confiscation, he wrapped the skull carefully and hid it deep inside an abandoned well, where it would remain untouched for more than 80 years. Only in 2018 did his family reveal the secret, and scientists finally gained access to what would soon be called Homo Longi, the Dragon Man. The name itself, derived from Longjang, meaning dragon river, evokes the mythical power of the East. But beyond poetic symbolism, this skull carried the potential to reshape our entire understanding of the human lineage. Was Homo longi a forgotten cousin or the missing chapter that links humanity's scattered roots? Share your thoughts below. Every theory brings us closer to understanding the riddle of our shared past. The first impression that struck researchers was its size. The skull was immense, far larger than that of an average modern human. Its cranial capacity, about 1,420 cubic centimeters, sits squarely within the range of Homo sapiens, yet its architecture was archaic. The brow ridges were thick and pronounced, the nasal opening was broad, the eye sockets were deep and square, and the cheekbones stood high and strong. Unlike modern humans, it lacked a defined chin, giving the lower face a more primitive appearance. Yet paradoxically, this skull also possessed a high cranial vault, a feature associated with advanced evolution. This strange combination of modern and ancient traits puzzled anthropologists. It was neither fully primitive nor entirely modern. It stood somewhere between epochs, bridging a gap that science had long struggled to define. This is where the greatest mystery lies. For many decades, scientists believed that Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans represented the last surviving branches of the genus Homo. But the dragon hominid challenges that tidy narrative. In a groundbreaking study published in 2021, researchers from Hebei Geo University proposed that Homo longi might be the closest known relative of modern humans, even more so than the Neanderthals. Through a series of detailed anatomical comparisons, they found that Dragon Man shared several advanced cranial features, with Homo sapiens suggesting a parallel evolutionary path that might have occurred in East Asia. If this is true, the origin of our species might not have been confined solely to Africa, as the classic out-of-Africa model claims. However, not all experts agreed. Other researchers argued that without genetic evidence, such conclusions remain speculative. Some saw undeniable similarities between the dragon hominid and the elusive Denisovans, a mysterious species first identified from fragments of bone and teeth in Siberia's Denisova cave. The Denisovans left genetic traces across modern Asian and Oceanian populations, hinting that their legacy continues within us. Could the Dragon Man actually be a Denisovan, or was he part of a distinct human species that thrived in the cold plains of northern China, a branch that lived, loved, and vanished without leaving a genetic fingerprint? Every analysis brings more questions than answers. The skull's unique proportions, massive yet refined, ancient yet advanced, resist easy classification. It is as if evolution itself experimented with multiple versions of humanity, sculpting different outcomes in distant corners of the world. The Dragon Man's skull was dated to roughly 146,000 years ago, placing him in the Middle Pleistocene, a turbulent period when several human species roamed the Earth simultaneously. Around that time, Neanderthals dominated Europe, Denisovans occupied parts of Asia, and early Homo sapiens were emerging in Africa. This means that Homo longi may have coexisted with all of them. The ancient world was not a simple linear progression from primitive to modern, but a complex web of parallel lineages, some interacting, others isolated, and some perhaps merging. The Dragon Man might have looked across the same frozen valleys where mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses roamed, never imagining that his descendants, if he had any, would one day debate his place in the story of humanity. Using digital reconstruction, scientists recreated the face of the dragon hominid, a being with deep-set eyes, beneath thick brows, a broad nose adapted for cold air, and a powerful jawline capable of crushing tough roots and meat. Despite his formidable appearance, his brain capacity suggests intelligence comparable to modern humans. Some researchers even suggest that Homo longi could have possessed language, symbolic thought, or social structures similar to early Homo sapiens. If so, then this was not a primitive brute, but a parallel intelligence, another version of humanity shaped by different conditions, possibly with its own culture, tools, and myths. Because no DNA has yet been recovered from the Dragon Man's skull, its genetic identity remains a ghost in the fossil record. The climate and soil chemistry of northern China make DNA preservation extremely difficult, yet the morphology alone bears echoes of the Denisovans. If future analysis confirms this link, the dragon hominid would become the first complete Denisovan skull ever identified, transforming mere fragments of bone into a recognizable human face. But if it turns out to be genetically distinct, then Homo longi would represent an entirely new branch of humanity, one that split from our common ancestor hundreds of thousands of years ago and survived deep into the Ice Age. Either way, this skull whispers a haunting truth: the human family tree is far from settled. It is not a straight line, but a tangled forest of forgotten species, each carrying part of the intelligence and curiosity that define us today. For too long, the story of evolution has been told mainly through discoveries in Africa and Europe, from Lucy in Ethiopia to Neanderthal in Germany. But the Dragon Man reminds us that Asia's vast and unexplored landscapes may hide equally crucial chapters. The discovery aligns with other fossil finds from Dali Jinyushan and Zhujiayao in China, each revealing humans who didn't quite fit existing categories. Perhaps Asia was not just a late receiver of human migration, but a second cradle of complexity where multiple species of hominins evolved side by side. The dragon hominid could be the key to understanding that forgotten epoch, the age when Homo sapiens was not alone, when humanity existed in plural forms. As of now, scientists remain divided. Was Homo longi a Denisovan, a close cousin of ours, or a completely new species? The answer will reshape not only textbooks, but the very definition of what it means to be human. Every feature carved into that ancient skull speaks of strength and survival. Yet beneath its heavy brow, one can almost sense intelligence, the spark that connects us across 140 millennia. Maybe somewhere within our DNA, fragments of his lineage endure silent, invisible, yet still alive. The dragon hominid is more than just a fossil. It is a mirror held up to evolution itself, reflecting how fragile and complex our own origins truly are. Deep beneath the emerald canopy of the Central American jungle lies a hidden world, silent, breathless, and untouched by time. Here where sunlight dies, at the cave's mouth, the ancient Maya believed the earth opened its jaws to reveal Xibalba, the feared realm of gods and spirits. These caves were not shelters, but doorways to the afterlife, where the living dared to speak with the dead. To cross their threshold was to abandon the human world, to descend into the veins of the earth, guided only by the flicker of firelight and the echo of prayers whispered to the gods below. Do you think the Maya were truly communicating with their gods, or descending into something far darker? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Archaeologists exploring the limestone labyrinths of Belize, Guatemala, and the Yucatan Peninsula have uncovered a network of caves unlike any other. These were not accidental formations of nature, but meticulously prepared ceremonial spaces. The walls are etched with soot. From ancient torches, the floors bear the marks of countless rituals, and at their deepest points, stone altars remain silent witnesses to ceremonies of sacrifice and devotion that took place over 1,000 years ago. In these caves, the Maya believed the gods could hear them more clearly. The echoes of human voices multiplied, and distorted by the natural acoustics, sounded like divine replies. For them, the caves were living entities with mouths that breathed wind, and veins that carried water, the essence of life itself. It was here, in the dim light of flickering flames, that they sought to communicate with deities who controlled rain, fertility, and death. One of the most haunting discoveries is Aktun Tunikil Muknal, often called the Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre. Deep inside, beneath dripping stalactites, lies the Crystal Maiden, the calcified skeleton of a young woman sacrificed centuries ago. Her bones, encrusted with minerals, now shimmer as if coated in glass, reflecting the torchlight in ghostly hues. Around her lie pottery vessels, obsidian blades, and the remains of other victims, men, women, and children, all seemingly offered to the gods of the underworld. But who were these victims? And more importantly, how were they chosen? This is the mystery that has eluded scholars for decades. Some early researchers assumed they were prisoners of war, captured enemies, sacrificed to honor the gods. Others proposed they were chosen from among the Maya's own people, children virgins, or high-status individuals selected through divine omens or astrological signs. Yet no single theory explains the patterns discovered in different caves. In some, only young women were found. In others, the remains of entire families. There are even caves where the skeletons bear no marks of violence, suggesting they may have died willingly or were symbolically offered to the gods through ritual, starvation, or suffocation. DNA studies, though limited by preservation, reveal an even stranger truth. The individuals do not all share the same regional origin. Some appear to have come from distant Maya cities, hundreds of kilometers away, implying that these sacred caves were pilgrimage destination sites of ceremonial journeys where select individuals were sent to meet their fate beneath the earth. It is possible they were chosen not by force, but by belief, viewed as honored messengers sent to deliver prayers directly to Xibalba. Imagine the scene: the flicker of torches on wet stone, the low chant of priests, the deep breath of the cave's wind echoing through the dark. The chosen one, perhaps trembling, perhaps serene, steps forward onto the stone altar. The sound of dripping water becomes a rhythm, a heartbeat of the underworld. In that moment, the living and the divine intersect. To the Maya, death was not an end. It was a continuation, a passage through the underworld across rivers of blood and bone until the soul reached renewal. Thus, the sacrifice was not viewed as murder, but as a sacred duty, a gift to maintain the balance between worlds. Each drop of blood spilled was an offering to sustain the cosmos, to bring rain, to ensure crops would grow, and to keep chaos at bay. Yet even as modern science sheds light on these ceremonies, the deeper motives remain obscured by time. Why did some caves hold hundreds of victims while others only one? Why were some bodies laid gently on the floor while others were positioned in strange symbolic postures, curled, stretched, or facing the cave's darkest depths? And why did some show signs of ritual decapitation or heart extraction, while others appeared untouched, as if simply laid to rest? Each cave seems to tell its own version of the same story, one of devotion, fear, and mystery. In Balankanshi, cave offerings to the rain god Chark were placed in ceramic pots aligned with shafts of light that only entered during the solstice. In Najtunik, elaborate murals depict priests descending into darkness, surrounded by glyphs that record prayers and cosmic dates. And in Jolja, cave paintings on the walls show processions of masked figures, perhaps real, perhaps spiritual, carrying torches toward the mouth of Xibalba. Some archaeologists suggest that the caves themselves served as calendrical devices aligned with celestial movements. When the first rays of sunlight reached specific chambers, it signaled a sacred moment, a time for ritual or sacrifice. The Maya masters of astronomy may have believed that even the underworld mirrored the heavens above. But there is another more haunting theory. Perhaps the chosen ones were selected through divination signs in the stars, dreams, or illnesses interpreted as messages from the gods. Some skeletal remains belong to individuals who suffered from deformities or disease conditions that may have been seen as divine marks. Others show evidence of high social status, suggesting that even the elite were not exempt from the gods' demand for balance. The deeper researchers go, the more complex the picture becomes. In some sites, chemical traces in bones reveal that victims consumed hallucinogenic plants before their deaths, a final communion to transcend pain and fear. In others, the remains suggest prolonged rituals where individuals were brought deep into the caves and left to die, slowly their spirits believed to wander the underworld, guiding rain clouds and fertility to the surface world. For centuries, these caves have remained sealed in silence, their secrets guarded by the earth itself. Even today, local Maya communities approach them with reverence and caution. Offerings of flowers, candles, and corn are still placed near their entrances. The belief persists that the gods of Xibalba are still listening, still watching, and still hungry for devotion. To enter these caves today is to feel that presence, an ancient energy that defies time and logic. The air grows thick, the sounds of the outside world fade, and you can almost sense that something or someone is still there, beyond the reach of light. The Maya caves are not just archaeological relics, they are living memories of a civilization that once erased the boundary between life and death, between humans and gods. The rituals within were not meant for cruelty, but to preserve the sacred link between two worlds. Yet one question still echoes in the darkness. Who were the chosen? Were they victims of faith or souls who willingly embraced their destiny? No one knows their names. No story remembers them. They remain nameless messengers, silently bridging two realms, frozen in the crystal silence of the earth, where perhaps the gods of Xibalba still wait for the next soul brave enough to enter. In the far northern reaches of Xinjiang, where the deserts of Zungaria meet the cold shadows of the Tian Shan Mountains, lies a mystery that few outside of Central Asia have ever heard of: a colossal wall of stone cutting through a barren, wind-scoured land. It stretches for many kilometers through silence, rising and falling with the shape of the dunes, marking a line that seems to have no destination. The locals call it simply the Stone Wall. To archaeologists, it is one of the least understood and most haunting structures ever discovered in the heart of Asia. No written record mentions its creation. No known culture claims it, and yet it stands weathered but unmistakable, like a scar drawn across the bones of the earth. Who do you think built the stone wall of Zungaria, an ancient civilization? Or someone even older? Share your theory in the comments below. The Zungarian Basin is one of the most isolated places on the planet. Vast, dry, and ringed by mountain chains, it has long been a borderland between worlds: the steppes of the north and the Silk Road to the south, the Mongols and the Chinese, the known and the forgotten. In the midst of this desolation, researchers stumbled upon a long, stony line rising from the sand, a wall built of massive rocks, some weighing several tons. Unlike the Great Wall of China, this construction is not connected to any historical record of empire or war. It is not even built with mortar. Instead, thousands of stones are stacked in perfect alignment, interlocking without visible binding material. Even after hundreds of years of erosion, the structure still holds together, suggesting a level of precision that defies simple explanation. The first explorers to document it thought it might be a natural formation, the result of fault lines or volcanic uplift. But later surveys revealed patterns too deliberate: corners, curves, and changes in elevation, as if its builders had followed a specific plan. Attempts to determine its age have failed to produce a clear answer. No organic materials have been recovered for carbon dating. The desert wind and time have stripped away every clue. Some geologists propose it may be only a few thousand years old, while others, noting the degree of weathering, suggest it could be 10,000 years old or more, dating back to a prehistoric civilization that vanished before written history began. That possibility opens an unsettling question if the wall truly predates all known cultures of Central Asia. Who could have built it? Archaeologists have compared it to other unexplained stoneworks around the world. The walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, the megalithic enclosures of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, or the Cyclopean fortresses of the Mediterranean. Each of these suggests that ancient humans possessed architectural skills far beyond what conventional history credits them with. Could the stone wall of Zungaria belong to this same mysterious category, a structure from an age when humanity's abilities were greater than we remember? The greatest puzzle is not just the wall itself, but the emptiness surrounding it. Archaeologists have found no evidence of settlement, no pottery shards, no tools, no burial sites. Nothing to indicate that a community ever lived nearby. A wall this massive would have required enormous manpower and resources, yet the builders left no trace of their existence. Why would anyone construct such a colossal barrier in a region that appears to have been uninhabited even in ancient times? If it were meant for defense, whom were they defending against? And if it served a ceremonial purpose, why here, in a place so far removed from known centers of ancient culture? Every answer leads only to more questions. Unlike most walls which enclose or protect, the stone wall of Zungaria does not surround anything. It runs for many kilometers and then simply ends, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. Its alignment follows a near-perfect north-south axis, deviating only slightly at certain intervals, almost as if the builders were guided by the stars. Some researchers have suggested an astronomical or geodesic function. Perhaps it was used to mark solstices or to measure time. Others propose that it served as a boundary line, a territorial marker between forgotten peoples. Yet without inscriptions or artifacts, every theory remains speculation. Still, the orientation is too precise to be coincidence. In ancient times, few civilizations could align structures with such accuracy without advanced tools. This precision fuels one of the more controversial ideas that the wall could be a remnant of a proto-civilization, one that existed long before the rise of China, Sumer, or Egypt. Despite its potential significance, official studies of the wall remain limited. Most information comes from satellite imagery and the accounts of local explorers. Chinese authorities have not opened the site to large-scale excavation, and foreign researchers rarely receive permission to study it. Whether this is due to the remoteness of the site, political restrictions, or simply lack of interest remains uncertain. This veil of silence only adds to the intrigue. When data is absent, imagination fills the gap. Online theories range from the plausible to the fantastical, from lost kingdoms to alien outposts, from ancient trade routes to forgotten cataclysms that reshaped the region. Yet none can answer the most fundamental question: who placed each stone, and for what reason? Even if the purpose of the wall was once practical, time has stripped away its meaning, leaving behind only its monumental presence. The stones, dark and cold, seem almost defiant, as though they were meant to outlast their creators. The harsh desert winds have carved strange patterns into the surface, making it appear alive in the shifting light. Some travelers claim the wall emits faint sounds during the night, the wind rushing through narrow gaps between stones, producing an eerie hum that echoes across the plain. Others have noticed that compasses behave erratically near certain sections, as if magnetic fields are subtly disturbed. Whether this is a geological quirk or something more mysterious, no one can say. In the folklore of nearby Kazakh and Uyghur communities, there are tales of a line of the ancients, built not by humans but by giants of stone who walked the earth before men. It was said to separate the world of the living from the world of the spirits. Such legends, while poetic, are impossible to verify, yet they reflect a profound truth. The wall still exerts an almost supernatural hold on the imagination. The more scientists study it, the less certain they become. Every measurement, every hypothesis collapses under the weight of missing data. In that sense, the stone wall of Zungaria functions as a mirror reflecting humanity's limited understanding of its own past. It stands as evidence of something we cannot yet explain, a reminder that not every monument fits neatly into the timelines of history. Perhaps it was a military fortification, a ceremonial alignment, or a remnant of a civilization erased by time. Or perhaps, as some suggest, it was never meant for humans at all, a boundary marker built for purposes that no longer exist. The desert offers no clues, only silence. The mystery of the stone wall of Zungaria endures. Who built it, when and why, no empire claims it. No culture explains it. No myth remembers it. It stands alone, stripped of meaning, yet defying time. Was it a barrier, or a sacred line traced beneath ancient stars? A monument to a lost people, or a warning left for those who came after, until the sands reveal their secrets? It will remain a riddle carved in stone, whispering of forgotten ages and civilizations erased from memory. Under the blazing Egyptian sun, they still rise, silent, perfect, defiant. Carved from single blocks of unyielding granite, the obelisks pierce the sky like frozen rays of light, each one aligned with the journey of the sun god himself. Thousands of years ago, these colossal monuments were born not merely as symbols of devotion, but as acts of impossible engineering. For behind their serene beauty lies a riddle that no empire, no scientist, no machine has ever truly solved. How did ancient hands move the mountains? How did they lift the weight of eternity and set it upright against the pull of gravity itself? Could the ancient Egyptians have known a technique we've completely forgotten? Share your theory in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Every obelisk began its life in Aswan, where the hardest granite in Egypt slept beneath the sun. The quarries still bear the scars of ancient tools, and among them lies a colossal enigma, the unfinished obelisk. Carved directly from the bedrock, it measures more than 40 meters long and would have weighed nearly 1,000 tons if completed. It cracked during extraction, and so it was abandoned. Yet even in its failure, it whispers of an almost superhuman ambition. The very idea that humans over 3,000 years ago could conceive of moving such a stone defies logic. The process began with workers carving deep trenches around the block, using dolerite pounders stones harder than the granite itself. They struck day after day, year after year, to free the monolith from the bedrock. But once the obelisk was detached, the true ordeal began. It had to be transported more than 100 kilometers north to Thebes or Heliopolis through desert sand and river, and not a single piece of it could break. Modern engineers have struggled to imagine how this was done without steel cranes wheels strong enough to bear hundreds of tons or hydraulic systems. The most accepted theory suggests that the Egyptians dragged the obelisks on massive wooden sledges, pouring water or oil onto the sand to reduce friction. Reliefs found in the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep show hundreds of men pulling a statue on a sledge while one man stands at the front, pouring water before it. But those depictions represent statues much smaller than obelisks, and the physics of scaling that process up to hundreds of tons becomes almost impossible. Even with the most generous calculations, the number of men required would exceed what could physically fit around the object. Then came the next impossible stage, moving the obelisk onto barges to float down the Nile. The Nile was the ancient highway of Egypt, but even so, the logistics boggle the mind. A single barge could not support the weight of such a stone without capsizing. Some historians propose that the Egyptians used twin barges tied together, forming a floating cradle for the obelisk. Others suggest that they built specialized wooden frames reinforced with papyrus ropes and buoyant timbers. Yet even with these designs, the question remains, how did they slide the stone onto the boats in the first place without sinking them? When the obelisks reached their destinations, Luxor, Karnak, or Heliopolis, the challenge became even more daunting. The Egyptians had to raise each one vertically, align it with cosmic precision, and set it perfectly on its base, all without breaking it. Ancient inscriptions describe the dedication of obelisks to the sun god Ra, but none record the method of erection. No blueprints, no manuals, no step-by-step accounts. Only silent monuments, left standing for millennia, defying gravity and explanation. Modern experiments have tried to reconstruct the feat. In the 20th century, engineers in Italy and Egypt attempted to raise small-scale replicas using ramps levers and counterweights. Even with modern understanding of physics, they faced constant failures. Stones cracked, supports collapsed, and the required manpower proved overwhelming. The truth seems to mock our confidence in progress. With cranes, steel, and machinery, we still cannot perfectly reproduce what ancient Egyptians accomplished with copper tools and rope. Perhaps the real secret of the obelisks was not brute strength, but a profound understanding of nature's invisible laws, a mastery of balance, pressure, and weight distribution that we no longer possess. Some modern engineers believe the Egyptians used water and sand as natural machines, tools of precision rather than power. In one hypothesis, workers constructed massive pits filled with sand, placed the obelisk horizontally above them, and then slowly released the sand through narrow tunnels, allowing gravity to lower the stone gently and evenly into position. Others imagined spiral ramps built around artificial sand mounds where the obelisk was tilted upright in stages, its immense mass controlled through the gradual removal of sand and the counterweight of earth. These methods would require astonishing foresight, coordination, and mathematical skill, proof that the Egyptians may have understood physics intuitively centuries before it was ever written down. Ingenious, elegant, and still unproven. Beyond the boundaries of traditional archaeology lies a realm of daring speculation, where science and mystery collide. Some researchers suggest that the ancient Egyptians might have possessed technologies now lost to time, the ability to use sound vibrations to lift stone, or even manipulate magnetic fields in ways modern physics has yet to rediscover. Though these ideas lack tangible proof, they persist because the scale of ancient achievements so profoundly challenges our understanding. When mathematics and machinery fall short of explanation, the human mind reaches for what lies beyond, a reminder that the past may still guard secrets far more advanced than we dare to believe. It's worth remembering that even the Romans, more than 1,000 years later, faced nearly insurmountable challenges when transporting Egyptian obelisks to their empire. The obelisk of Thutmose III, now standing in Rome, required an entire fleet of ships, hundreds of engineers, and months of perilous navigation. When one considers that the Egyptians accomplished similar feats without iron or mechanical advantage, the word impossible begins to lose meaning. What motivated them to attempt it in the first place? These were not mere decorations. Each obelisk was a symbol of divine connection, a petrified beam of sunlight linking heaven and earth. Pharaohs ordered them to proclaim their power and to honor the sun, god Ra. The higher the obelisk, the closer it reached toward the divine. But perhaps it was also a declaration of knowledge, a silent message carved in stone. We can move mountains. And yet after thousands of years, we still cannot fully decode that message. We walk among the remains of temples, we measure every angle and tool mark, and still the question echoes louder than ever. How did they do it? How did humans with simple tools accomplish what seems to defy every law of modern engineering? Was it genius, faith, or something we have yet to understand? The obelisks of Egypt stand today in cities far from their birthplace: Rome, London, Paris, New York, each a trophy of human willpower. But while modern cranes hoisted them into place centuries later, none of those efforts can match the mystery and precision of the originals. Every time sunlight strikes their peaks, it's as if the ancients are whispering across time, reminding us that there was once a civilization that mastered stone spirit and science in ways we can scarcely comprehend. Perhaps the greatest achievement of ancient Egypt was not simply in building these monuments, but in ensuring that their mystery would endure forever. For as long as we stand in their shadow and ask how the legacy of their brilliance remains alive, a challenge from the past that our future may never truly answer. Matara looks like an ordinary southern Sri Lankan city until you notice the oldest clue is hiding in plain sight: its name. Matara is repeatedly explained in Sri Lankan place name studies and later summaries as the Great Ferry, sometimes broadened to Great Seaport or even Great Fortress, linked to the wide crossing of the Nilwala River before modern bridges existed. The same tradition preserves older labels such as Maha-Totara/Maha-Patana, essentially Great Landing/Port, and European spellings recorded in the 17th to 18th centuries. In other words, the town's identity is born from a river-to-sea threshold, a point where traffic must slow down, transfer pay, and move again. But here is where the ancient mystery begins. If Matara truly functioned as a core port zone, an operational hub for goods boats and people, why is there no single universally agreed smoking gun structure that everyone can point to today as the ancient harbor itself? Unlike the dramatic ruins of inland capitals, ports often vanish without leaving a monument. A shoreline shifts, an estuary silts, warehouses get rebuilt, and the port's center moves a few hundred meters every century until the original is buried or erased. To understand why Matara's port core can feel like a ghost, you need the geography and its ruthless habit of rewriting maps. Matara sits on the Nilwala River close to the open Indian Ocean. Estuaries are perfect for ancient logistics. Boats can shelter from waves, cargo can travel inland by river, and fresh water is near at hand. Yet estuaries are also unstable archives. Silt builds up channels, migrate floods, cut new paths, and a port that was once on the water can end up inland under later streets. This is not a poetic claim. It is a recurring problem in maritime archaeology worldwide, and it is especially sharp on river mouths. So the first hypothesis behind the Matara ancient port core is almost boring but powerful. The core may exist, but it may not be where modern eyes expect it to be. The second hypothesis is harsher. The core might have been partially destroyed or sealed by urban development long before anyone excavated it at scale. Now compare Matara to other southern Sri Lankan coastal nodes where archaeology has produced clearer trade signatures. On the same broad southern seaboard, research programs have used ceramics inscriptions and port site surveying to reconstruct ancient maritime networks linking Sri Lanka with South India and the wider Indian Ocean. A key point from such work is that ports were often organized around river mouths and inland routes, not just open beaches. This matches Matara's Great Ferry logic. In Hambantota district, the site of Godawaya is regularly cited as having archaeological evidence for an ancient settlement and a seaport role in southern sea trade. Scholarship discussing Godawaya emphasizes field results that anchor the claim in excavated material and documented study rather than etymology. And in the broader southern region, excavations at Tisamharama have produced early layers with foreign connection indicators such as a Tamil Brahmi pottery inscription provisionally dated to around 200 BC-CE, showing how early the island's south/east was entangled with cross-water communities and agreements. These are the kinds of artifacts, import ceramics inscriptions, anchoring installations, industrial debris that turn a likely port into a demonstrated port. Matara's puzzle is that its oldest identity screams transfer point, yet public-facing archaeological proof for a specific ancient harbor installation is not as widely consolidated as at some comparator sites. That doesn't mean the proof is absent. It may be scattered unpublished to general audiences or locked inside protected monument registers and localized discoveries rather than one famous excavation. In fact, Matara district contains a catalogue of officially recognized archaeological protected monuments, evidence that the region is archaeologically active and regulated, even if those entries are not automatically the port core itself. This creates an informational gap that fuels mystery storytelling. The name and location imply a port, the coastline is historically strategic, but the average viewer cannot Google one definitive ancient harbor of Matara plan the way they can for more iconic sites. The gap can be explained without conspiracy. Ports are messy and multi-layered, but it still raises a question worth asking: was Matara's core primarily a river ferry and provisioning zone boats, people taxes, rather than a stone-built ocean harbor? If so, the archaeological signature would be lighter, more perishable, and easier to overwrite. Another strand of the Matara tradition deepens the intrigue references that Matara served as a capital under a monarchy and was known by names including Mapatuna in later descriptions. Whether every detail of this claim survives critical historical scrutiny is precisely the point. The tradition suggests Matara was not merely a fishing landing, but a node that could matter politically and economically. Ports that matter politically often leave mixed evidence. Administrative seals coin finds standardized weights, storage pits, industrial slag, or religious endowments tied to merchants. Yet ports can also be successful without leaving grand architecture. Timber jetties rot away, and brick warehouses become foundations for later markets. If the port core of Matara was repeatedly rebuilt from early historic phases through medieval and then early modern fortification eras, then the port becomes a moving target across time, a layered palimpsest rather than one clean ruin. The wider Indian Ocean context makes this even sharper. Sri Lanka's role in maritime trade is documented through multiple streams of evidence: coins, ceramics, inscriptions, and site sequences often concentrated at well-studied ports and inland capitals with strong material records. Studies and summaries of Greco-Roman/Indo-Roman exchange emphasize that coins and imported goods appear across the island, and named ports, such as Godawaya, are explicitly discussed in that trade framework. Even very recent scholarship continues to excavate and model southern port sites. Karinda, for example, has published excavation sequences and stratified occupation horizons, showing that the southern coastline still yields new data when trenches are actually opened. That is the practical lesson for Matara. The mystery is not impossible technology, but missing excavation visibility. When research digs, the coastline talks. When it doesn't, the coastline keeps its secrets. So what would count as a decisive archaeological hit for the Matara ancient port core? Not a romantic ruin, but a cluster of very specific things: stratified occupation layers near the old river crossing, with evidence of intense human traffic fire residues, cut and fill, repeated resurfacing, a mixed ceramic assemblage with non-local wares, transport jars, or production debris, inscriptions or short marks tied to merchants or agreements, analogous in spirit to the early Tamil Brahmi example from Tisamharama, dated around 200 BCE, spatial indicators of storage and redistribution post holes of warehouses, concentrations of weights, or standardized containers, an environmental reconstruction proving that a navigable channel existed at a specific time, because without paleogeography, port core is just a guess. Each of these is testable. None requires myth. But until such evidence is published in a way that binds Matara equals Great Ferry to a mapped, dated harbor zone, Matara will remain the kind of place that feels like a port you can sense yet cannot quite point to. Hidden deep within the rugged mountains of central Afghanistan lies a place that once pulsed with light color and prayer and now whispers only echoes of a vanished world. The fortified caves of Bamyan stretch across the sandstone cliffs of the Bamyan Valley, a breathtaking yet haunting reminder of a civilization that merged art, faith, and architecture into one monumental mystery. For centuries, travelers along the Silk Road spoke of Bamyan as a holy city carved from living rock, a labyrinth of chambers and tunnels that seemed less built by human hands and more sculpted by time itself. Yet beneath the beauty of its murals and colossal statues lies an enigma that continues to baffle historians and archaeologists alike. Who designed this immense underground fortress, and for what ultimate purpose? Who do you think designed and built this magnificent cave system? The monks, a mysterious dynasty, or a long-lost group of architects? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Long before the region became synonymous with conflict and ruin, Bamyan was a flourishing center of Buddhist scholarship and meditation. Between the 2nd and 8th centuries, monks carved thousands of caves into the towering cliffs, some simple dwellings, others ornate temples with high ceilings and intricately painted walls. They lived, studied, and meditated within this silent stone sanctuary, surrounded by the 2 colossal Buddha statues that once guarded the valley, standing over 50 meters tall. These statues, now lost to history, were not isolated monuments, but the spiritual heart of an entire complex that merged sacred devotion with strategic mastery. The caves around them were connected by stairways and secret passages, forming an intricate fortified network that could withstand both time and attack. The structure of Bamyan's caves reveals a startling sophistication. Some chambers were small meditation cells, but others expanded into halls capable of holding dozens of people. Ventilation shafts provided air deep underground, and angled corridors allowed sunlight to illuminate altars and frescoes without exposing the inner sanctuaries to the harsh winds of the valley. Many caves were reinforced with stone pillars or wooden beams, evidence that the builders not only mastered aesthetic design, but also understood advanced principles of engineering and stability. Archaeologists have noted the presence of elevated watchpoints, defensive walls, and even remnants of storage areas for food and water, leading to the theory that the cave complex once functioned as a hidden fortress during times of war. The link between Bamyan's sacred and defensive functions is what makes it so unusual. While Buddhist monasteries were often places of peace, the caves here seem to have served a dual role, a sanctuary for faith and a fortress for survival. Several of the larger chambers have narrow openings that could have been used as lookout points or archery slits. Hidden tunnels connect higher caves with those closer to the valley floor, suggesting a design meant for quick escape or covert movement. Such features would have required precise planning knowledge of rock composition and an understanding of how to manipulate terrain, all of which point toward a centralized design system far beyond what isolated monks might have achieved on their own. And yet no record survives to tell us who oversaw this grand design. Ancient texts describe Bamyan as a great Buddhist kingdom, but none name the architects or engineers who shaped its cliffs. Was it a royal commission, ordered by a forgotten dynasty, determined to blend spiritual devotion with military strategy? Or was it the work of an organized monastic order, a hidden brotherhood of architects and masons who understood how to transform stone into both temple and bastion? Some researchers suggest that Bamyan's builders might have belonged to a cross-cultural guild that traveled the Silk Road, merging techniques from India, Persia, and China into a unique architectural language that has no parallel elsewhere in the ancient world. The mystery deepens when one examines the precision of the cave's defensive geometry. The angles of the entrances, the distribution of sight lines, and the layering of chambers across vertical tiers all seem too deliberate to be coincidental. Certain sections mirror the layout of ancient fortresses found in Central Asia, while others echo the design of Buddhist stupas, symbolic representations of the cosmos. It is as if the builders attempted to weave both cosmic harmony and military logic into a single monumental design. But without inscriptions or records, archaeologists are left to interpret only the silence of stone. Adding to the intrigue are the paintings found within the caves. Using pigments derived from lapis lazuli, cinnabar, and even oils made from linseed and resin, the artists of Bamyan created some of the world's earliest examples of oil-based painting, predating the European Renaissance by more than 6 centuries. The walls shimmered once with celestial imagery, golden halos, lotus flowers, winged figures, and geometric patterns that some scholars believe encoded cosmological knowledge. Were these images purely devotional, or did they serve as a kind of coded map for initiates who understood the spiritual architecture of the site? Some experts suspect that certain chambers aligned with the movement of the sun and stars might have been used for astronomical observation or ritual navigation, again, pointing to a level of planning that transcends mere monastic labor. When the tide of history turned with invasions, religious shifts, and centuries of neglect, the caves changed hands. Muslim settlers, Mongol armies, and local tribes each left their traces, carving inscriptions or repurposing chambers into homes and storage vaults. Layer upon layer of history accumulated, turning Bamyan into a palimpsest of civilizations. Yet even through these transformations, the underlying structure remained too complex, too deliberate, too unified to have been formed by chance. Every tunnel and stairway seems to follow a forgotten blueprint, suggesting that someone or some group once understood the total design of the mountain itself. Modern archaeologists have tried to reconstruct this blueprint through 3-dimensional scanning and drone imaging, but the full scope of the network remains elusive. Hundreds of caves remain inaccessible, either collapsed or sealed off by debris and unexploded ordnance left from recent conflicts. Satellite imagery hints at undiscovered chambers deep within the cliffs, while local legends speak of hidden rooms filled with relics and manuscripts buried beyond reach. Could these unseen chambers hold the missing records of Bamyan's architects, the planned scrolls or carvings that would finally reveal their identity? Or has time erased their story, completely leaving only the question as their legacy? This unresolved question, who designed the fortified caves of Bamyan and why, haunts every expedition to the valley. The scale of the project suggests more than simple devotion. It required manpower, organization, and knowledge of geology, geometry, and engineering. It demanded foresight, the ability to imagine a mountain as both temple and fortress, and yet the anonymity of its creators stands in stark contrast to their genius. Perhaps they intended it so to build something eternal and selfless, a monument to enlightenment that transcends the ego of the builder. Or perhaps they vanished before they could inscribe their names, their knowledge swallowed by the very stone they shaped. As the sun sets over the silent cliffs of Bamyan, the wind whispers through the hollow caves where the Buddhas once stood. In that echo lingers the secret of those who carved a mountain into a fortress, blending faith art and strategy into one eternal mystery. The fortified caves of Bamyan are not mere ruins, but a riddle written in stone and light. Their walls breathe with centuries of silence, awaiting the day their design is understood. Until then, one question endures: who built the fortress of Bamyan? And what truth were they trying to protect? Beneath the burning sands of northern Peru, a secret slept for 17 centuries, a tomb untouched, glittering with gold and death. In 1987, archaeologist Walter Alva uncovered what became known as the Tutankhamun of the Americas. Inside lay a man adorned as both king and god, surrounded by warriors' sacrifices and treasures beyond imagination. Yet the real mystery was not the gold, it was him. Who was the Lord of Saipan? A ruler, a priest, or something divine? His golden mask still stares through time, guarding a secret the desert refuses to reveal. Was the Lord of Saipan a king, a priest, or something beyond human? Share your theory in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. The story began in Huaca Rajada, near the small town of Sipan. Looters had been secretly digging into ancient mounds, hoping to find gold. When police intervened and contacted Alva, what followed became one of the most significant finds in the Americas. Hidden inside a sealed adobe chamber was the intact burial of a Mahe ruler, untouched for over 17 centuries. It was the first royal tomb of pre-Columbian America, found completely unlooted, an archaeological miracle. Inside, archaeologists uncovered a scene of divine ritual and unimaginable wealth. More than 600 artifacts of gold, silver, copper, and precious stones surrounded the body of a man adorned with jewels, helmets, and armor. His attire shimmered in the torchlight, an image frozen in time, whispering of a forgotten world where power and religion were one. The Moche civilization thrived along Peru's northern coast between the 1st and 8th centuries of the Common Era. They built irrigation canals across the desert, sculpted monumental temples like the Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna, and developed a complex society ruled by warrior priests. Their art depicted ceremonies, battles, and sacrifices, revealing both their creativity and their brutality. Yet without a written language, the Moche left historians with only fragments, pottery, murals, and bones to tell their story. Saipan, as it turned out, was not just a burial ground. It was a royal necropolis, the final resting place of Moche elites, priests, and warriors. But the most magnificent tomb belonged to the one they called El Señor de Sipan, the Lord of Saipan. The tomb itself was a masterpiece of sacred engineering. Constructed in multiple levels, each layer represented a spiritual hierarchy from common retainers to the divine ruler himself. The Lord's body rested at the center, adorned with elaborate regalia, a gold headdress, crescent-shaped earrings, necklaces of turquoise and chrysocolor breastplates, and nose ornaments gleaming like the sun. His sandals of copper symbolized that even in death he walked among gods. Around him lay the bodies of his companions. 2 young women, possibly wives or priestesses, 2 warriors still wearing their armor, a child, a dog symbol of guidance to the afterlife, and 2 llamas sacrificed to serve him beyond death. Every detail was deliberate, every placement meaningful. The air of reverence was so palpable that even seasoned archaeologists felt as though they had stepped into a temple of eternity. Among the countless objects were symbols that revealed the spiritual and political order of the Moche. The gold and silver peanuts necklace represented the duality of life and death, sun and moon, male and female. The pectoral ornaments depicted warriors and deities, showing that the Lord of Saipan was both a political and divine figure, perhaps a living god-king. Weapons found beside him, copper spear throwers, shields and banners suggested he led his people in war, while ceremonial items like scepters and masks showed his role as intermediary between mortals and gods. Every artifact told a story, but together they spoke of one thing: absolute authority. The arrangement of the tomb suggests an elaborate funerary ritual. The Lord's body was placed in a wooden coffin, dressed in finery and surrounded by offerings of food, gold, and sacrificed lives. The accompanying individuals were not mere servants, they were participants in a sacred passage. Their deaths ensured that the Lord would never walk alone in the afterlife. Some objects even hinted at astronomical alignment and seasonal symbolism, implying that the Moche saw death not as an end, but as a transformation. Through sacrifice and ceremony, the Lord's spirit ascended to the divine realm, continuing to rule from beyond. For the modern world, the discovery of Saipan did more than reveal an ancient tomb, it resurrected an entire civilization. The artifacts displayed in the Tumbas Reales de Saipan Museum, designed as an inverted pyramid, offer a glimpse into the artistic genius and spiritual complexity of the Moche. These treasures rival the tomb of Tutankhamun in splendor, yet they remain uniquely Andean, born of desert, ocean, and mountain. But even with all these revelations, the mystery only deepens. Despite decades of study, no one truly knows who the Lord of Saipan was. Was he a king, a warrior priest, or perhaps a god incarnate? His grave suggests he ruled over life and death, commanding armies and presiding over sacred sacrifices. Yet his true name, lineage, and story remain lost. No written record names him. The Moche language has vanished. All we have are symbols, warriors in gold, gods with fanged faces, and patterns that echo a forgotten theology. Modern scientists have turned to genetic analysis, hoping to trace his ancestry, but even that has yielded only fragments of truth. Some researchers propose that he was part of a hereditary dynasty of priest-kings whose power stemmed from their ability to perform sacred rituals tied to celestial cycles. Others suggest he was deified after death, a human turned divine. There is even speculation that the Lord may represent a title rather than a single man, the embodiment of the Moche ideal ruler replicated through generations. The most haunting question remains, how could such a powerful civilization disappear so completely? The Moche left behind no chronicles, no records of conquest, and no sign of foreign invasion. Did climate change destroy their crops? Did rebellion end their reign? Or did their faith in divine kingship collapse from within? The Lord of Saipan, silent beneath layers of gold and earth, still holds that answer. In the Museum of Lambayeque, the golden mask of the Lord of Saipan still stares through time, a silent witness to power, faith, and mortality. His treasures now gleam under lights, yet his true identity remains lost in shadow. The Moche have vanished, but their mystery endures. Perhaps that is Saipan's greatest legacy, not the gold, but the question that still echoes through centuries: who was he really? Amid the harsh highlands of Ethiopia, where seasonal downpours can turn the earth into chaotic streams, stands a monumental complex that continues to astonish engineers, geologists, and archaeologists alike. The 11 monolithic churches of Lalibela, carved directly from massive basalt rock. More importantly, they are surrounded by a drainage system so sophisticated that modern science still cannot fully explain it. Although these churches have existed for nearly 9 centuries, they have never flooded, never suffered severe erosion, and never allowed water to flow into their interiors. All of this is due to a network of channels, vertical shafts, underground trenches, and drainage basins organized with the precision of a hydraulic blueprint, far beyond what should have been possible in the 12th century. So what do you think who created this incredibly advanced drainage system? The people of that era, or a lost source of knowledge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. When researchers examined the entire Lalibela complex, they realized that the drainage system was not merely created to redirect water, it reflected a level of hydraulic understanding that left them astonished. Rainwater flowing from above is guided through stone-cut channels, carved directly into the basalt bedrock, each one shaped with an almost perfect gradient. Some channels stretch for dozens of meters, yet their slope deviates by only a few millimeters, a degree of precision difficult to achieve even with modern measuring tools. Many of the conduits cut straight through solid rock, forming vertical and horizontal shafts that interlink deeper layers, keeping the entire complex dry even during intense rainy seasons. At locations most prone to water accumulation, ancient builders carved catchment basins, positioned at precisely the right spots, as if the designer understood in detail how the flow would shift with each wind direction, storm pattern, and seasonal change. The most perplexing aspect for researchers is that many of the subterranean water channels end in strange and unexpected ways. Some empty into hollow chambers with no signs of use, others vanish into narrow, lightless fissures, and some descend into deep pits that have never been measured. Several passages lie within sacred zones and are therefore forbidden to survey, leaving much of the system hidden like a partially revealed hydraulic labyrinth. This obscurity has led many scholars to believe that Lalibela's drainage network may be far larger than what we currently see, perhaps containing entire layers of connections that no one has ever accessed. What fuels the greatest debate among scholars is the question of how such an advanced technical system could exist in 12th century Ethiopia. There are no architectural blueprints, no documents recording teams of craftsmen or engineers, and no traces of specialized tools for large-scale hydraulic construction. King Lalibela is regarded as the one who ordered the project, but ordering is entirely different from calculating and designing. Ancient texts describe the construction using religious language, some even claiming that the churches were completed with the help of angels working at night. A metaphor that reflects how people of that era could not comprehend the level of engineering required, a level far beyond what their time should have been able to achieve. When modern specialists use three-dimensional laser scanning to study Lalibela, they discovered that the underground channel system was not created randomly but followed hydraulic principles equivalent to those used by professional engineers. The slopes were consistently uniform, the drainage outlets positioned at optimal points, and the branching channels distributed water pressure with remarkable efficiency. There were even natural flood relief mechanisms designed to ease the load during heavy rainfall. This level of sophistication prompted researchers to ask a profound question: did 12th century Ethiopians truly possess such advanced technical knowledge, or were they inheriting or even being guided by a source of expertise that has vanished from recorded history? One of the most controversial theories suggests that the engineering behind Lalibela's drainage system may have originated from an ancient civilization that possessed advanced stone cutting and water management techniques, with the people of Lalibela merely inheriting that knowledge without leaving any written record. Other researchers lean toward the possibility that monks or architects from the Middle East or Egypt brought hydraulic expertise to Ethiopia during pilgrimage routes. However, there is no archaeological evidence confirming their presence. Even more intriguing, the drainage channels carved directly into Lalibela's basalt bedrock exhibit characteristics completely different from construction methods found in both Africa and the Middle East of the same era. This striking disparity makes the technology transfer hypothesis less convincing and opens the possibility that the true source of knowledge behind this engineering feat remains beyond our current understanding. One aspect that especially fascinates researchers is that Lalibella's drainage system is not purely functional, but deeply intertwined with spiritual practice. Many of the water channels were positioned to guide flowing water into rock-hewn cavities, underground chambers, and small basins where believers once performed baptism, purification rituals, and other sacred ceremonies. This has led many scholars to propose that the entire system was designed not only to prevent flooding, but also to embody profound symbolic meaning, the flowing water representing the journey of spiritual cleansing, a central theme in Ethiopian Christianity. If this hypothesis is correct, the designer possessed not only advanced hydraulic knowledge but also a deep understanding of religious symbolism, a rare combination that reveals the remarkably sophisticated thinking behind the creation of this ancient complex. Yet despite all theories, the central question remains growing more urgent as new anomalies are discovered within the tunnels. Who truly designed the drainage system of Lalibela? This is not a metaphorical or mythic question, it is a technical one. A system of water channels with precision beyond its era, functioning flawlessly for hundreds of years, yet lacking blueprints, written records, or the name of its architect. If King Lalibela ordered its construction, then who calculated the slopes? Who determined the position of each drainage line? Who understood the internal structure of the massive basalt formation before carving into it by hand? No document answers these questions. No archaeological discovery explains them. And with every heavy rain that falls on the site, the system continues to function perfectly, as though it were created with the knowledge of a lost engineering tradition. More than 8 centuries have passed. Lalibela still stands unflooded, unsunken, unweathered. Yet the greatest mystery remains untouched: the identity of the invisible architect who created this unparalleled drainage system. Amid the frozen Altai Mountains, where Siberian winds sweep across white valleys and winter seems endless, archaeologists uncovered one of the strangest discoveries of the Iron Age: the Ice Maiden's female bodies buried in permafrost for more than 2,500 years, with ancient tattoos still sharp, clear, and seemingly newly made. These tattoos are not only beautiful and exquisitely crafted, but they carry a profound mystery that modern science still cannot unlock. What was their function? Why did they exist? And what compelled an ancient nomadic society to invest immense effort into such painful body art? What do you think these tattoos were created for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The preservation of the Ice Maidens is so extraordinary that it challenges our understanding of what time can destroy. Their skin, protected by Siberia's unforgiving permafrost, remained almost untouched by decay. Even the texture of muscles beneath is still discernible. Most astonishing are the tattoo's lines, so dark, crisp, and precise that they appear freshly inked rather than 25 centuries old, stretching across shoulders, arms, backs, chests, and even delicate finger joints. These motifs reveal an entire symbolic language of the Pazyryk people. When illuminated in laboratory conditions, spiral antlered deer, fierce snow leopards, galloping horses, hunting birds, and mythical hybrids emerge with a vividness that feels impossibly modern. This level of preservation has led many researchers to question not only how the tattoos were made, but how they survived in such near-perfect clarity, a visual time capsule defying both nature and expectation. Although the tattooing technique of the Pazyryk people is astonishing, the true mystery does not lie in how they tattooed, but in the meaning hidden behind every line. In many ancient cultures, tattoos served clear social functions, identifying warriors, marking status, recording rites of passage, or protecting individuals from harmful spirits. Yet the tattoos on the Ice Maidens do not fit any known pattern. Artifacts found in their tombs, gold silk Persian imports, finely woven carpets, indicate they belonged to an elite class. However, the dense concentration of tattoos, stretching from shoulders to back, from chest to arms, suggests a deeper significance. They may have been shamans, healers, or intermediaries between two worlds. Even so, no direct evidence confirms this theory. The absence of answers only widens the mystery, like a dark corridor, where every step forward reveals yet another unanswered question. Many modern scholars have attempted to decode each pattern, but strangely, the Ice Maiden's tattoos are not mere animals. They feature elongated spiral antlers, stretched bodies, and heavily stylized details, as if depicting something surreal, symbolic, or not entirely earthly. This eliminates the decoration theory. No ancient person would endure such pain for purely aesthetic reasons, unless the tattoos held deep spiritual value. Some theories propose that the tattoos were protective talismans, guiding and defending them in the journey to the afterlife. The powerful animals, deer snow leopards, and horned hybrids may represent guardian spirits. But if so, why were they exclusive to certain individuals? And why do the compositions repeat specific structures, almost like a coded system? Another group of researchers believes the tattoos recorded their life stories, achievements, rites of passage, spiritual connections. But the layout does not follow any readable sequence. There is no narrative flow, no chronological order, no beginning or end. All symbols are arranged non-linearly, as though representing a worldview completely different from ours. The strongest yet most controversial theory suggests that the Ice Maidens were nomadic shamans, and their tattoos were visual language used in sacred rituals. The hybrid creatures inked on their skin were not literal animals, but symbols of ancestral spirits, or visions seen during trance states. This corresponds to shamanic traditions across Siberia and Central Asia, where body art, costumes, and objects guided spirits during ceremonies. But deeper excavations revealed something even stranger. None of the tattoo patterns match across the different bodies. Each Ice Maiden possessed a unique tattoo map. No repetition, no template, as if each tattoo was a personal spiritual key, a coded identity that could not be transferred or duplicated. If this is true, then the greatest question becomes, who designed these tattoos? Another shaman, a specialized tattoo artisan, or were the Ice Maidens themselves the ones who defined these symbols? The tattooing technique was remarkably advanced. They used bronze needles, charcoal ink, and repeated puncturing, much like modern tattoo methods. This implies the existence of professional tattoo practitioners, something never documented in ancient nomadic cultures. One question remains: how did a harsh nomadic society develop such complex body art technology? The tattoos appear on shoulders, neck, spine, chest, and even fingers, areas excruciatingly painful when tattooed with primitive tools. This leads researchers to an unavoidable conclusion. They accepted the pain because the tattoos held deep, sacred significance, not superficial beauty. They may have been part of an initiation ritual, or a symbol of devotion, or as anthropologists propose, a remnant of a lost religion where the human body served as a temple, and tattoos were sacred texts inscribed upon flesh. If true, then the Ice Maidens were not ordinary individuals. They might have been keepers of knowledge, living libraries carrying sacred information not on parchment, but on their skin. Even today, with advanced laser scanning and pigment analysis, scientists still cannot decode the structure of these tattoos. No one knows the order in which they were made. No one knows their true meaning. No one knows the authors behind them. Each new discovery only deepens the mystery. The only certainty is the tattoos of the Ice Maidens were not mere art. They were language, a language of spirit, memory, symbolism, and stories forever untold. The greatest mystery is not that the tattoos survived. It is why they existed in the first place. Were they messages to future generations, codes from a forgotten world, or meanings meant only for their bearers, never intended to be explained? Until more evidence appears, the ancient Siberian ice maiden's tattoos will remain one of the most haunting, beautiful, and profound mysteries ever found in the Siberian permafrost. High in the misty heart of the Andes, the stones of the Inca still whisper a challenge to time itself. Carved with impossible precision, these colossal walls, from Sacsayhuaman to Ollantaytambo, have endured centuries of earthquakes without a single crack. There is no mortar binding them, no cement holding them in place, and yet they fit so tightly together that not even a human hair can slip between the stones. How could a civilization without iron wheels or written plans achieve such perfection? Some call it genius, others call it a mystery carved in stone, a puzzle that even modern science cannot solve. What do you think? Did the Inca uncover a lost technology, or were they simply masters of patience and precision? Share your theory in the comments below. At first glance, the Inca walls appear chaotic stones of all sizes with irregular shapes and uneven edges. But step closer and the illusion of chaos vanishes. Every block fits its neighbors with a precision that modern masons still struggle to replicate. There is no standard pattern. Each stone seems to have been uniquely crafted to match the surrounding ones, like a giant three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. This design allows the structures to breathe, with the earth shifting slightly during earthquakes without breaking. When the ground trembles, the walls move as one living body, absorbing and releasing energy instead of resisting it. That is why, while Spanish colonial buildings collapsed, the Inca walls remained. Each stone in the Inca walls is like a piece of nature's giant puzzle, rough in texture, yet astonishingly precise. Some blocks weigh several tons, others over 100, but all fit together so perfectly that no gap can be seen. Many corners are gently curved, embracing the stones beside them, as if each piece had once been softened and fused before hardening again. When sunlight strikes at an angle, those curved surfaces shimmer like ripples over stone, giving the impression that the wall itself is breathing. It is this organic geometry that allows Inca walls to absorb seismic shocks and endure countless earthquakes. These structures were not merely built, they were engineered, sculpted, and brought to life according to a principle that humanity still struggles to comprehend. This is where the enigma deepens. The Inca civilization possessed no iron, no steel, no advanced metal tools. Their hammers and chisels were made of bronze or harder stones, materials far inferior to the granite diorite and andesite they shaped. These rocks are so hard that even modern diamond-tipped equipment struggles to cut them cleanly. And yet the surfaces of many Inca blocks are polished to near perfection, with smooth edges, curved faces, and angles that align with sub-millimeter accuracy. Some archaeologists propose that the Incas used endless patience, grinding the surfaces together for days or weeks until they fit. Others believe they used wooden wedges soaked in water to split stone by pressure. But none of these explanations account for the rounded corners, the concave depressions, and the melting-like textures visible in many sites. The surfaces sometimes appear as if the stone itself had been softened or even liquefied, molded like clay, and left to cool. This has given rise to one of the most controversial ideas in Andean archaeology, the hypothesis of soft stone technology. According to this theory, the ancient builders discovered a natural chemical or biological method to temporarily soften hard rock. Some researchers following Inca legends mention a sacred plant known as pito pito or Qohaito, whose juice was said to melt stone like wax. There are also references from early Spanish chroniclers who heard from local priests that the walls were grown, not built. Modern experiments with natural acids and plant-based solvents have achieved partial results, softening limestone or sandstone, but never granite or andesite. Still, the myth persists. Could it be that the Inca inherited a forgotten technology from a civilization even older than their own? Something that allowed them to manipulate matter in ways lost to modern science. When one looks closely at the stones of Sacsayhuaman, certain patterns repeat indentations that resemble sockets, small protrusions that look like handles, and symmetrical depressions on adjoining blocks, as though some unknown instrument once gripped, rotated, or heated the surface. These marks do not align with hammer blows or primitive chiseling. Instead, they suggest a process of controlled alteration, perhaps heat vibration or chemical change. Some geologists argue these are natural features of weathering. Others disagree, pointing out that the same textures appear only at the contact points, the exact areas where two stones interlock. It is almost as if the material was softened precisely where it needed to fit. The possibility of ancient thermal or vibrational shaping remains speculative, but no one can explain how so many massive stones could be cut and joined with such accuracy using the known tools of that era. The transportation of the Inca's massive stones remains one of archaeology's most baffling mysteries. At Ollantaytambo, some blocks weigh over 200 tons, quarried from sites more than 10 kilometers away across steep mountains, deep rivers, and rugged valleys. The Inca had no wheels, no beasts of burden strong enough, and left no traces of ramps or lifting mechanisms. Theories suggesting they rolled the stones on logs or dragged them with ropes quickly collapse under scrutiny. The Andes is uneven, and there are no trees large or straight enough to serve as rollers. And yet somehow these stones were transported, lifted, rotated into position, and fitted with absolute precision. The combination of inhuman accuracy and impossible logistics turns the Inca walls into one of the greatest engineering enigmas in history, forcing us to wonder, was this truly a triumph of human effort or a remnant of knowledge long lost to the modern world? Earthquakes are frequent in the Andes, and yet the Inca walls have survived hundreds of them with minimal damage. The secret lies in the irregular design. The stones are tilted slightly inward, forming a trapezoidal shape that stabilizes the wall. Their joints are flexible. When the ground shakes, the stones wiggle but never fall. The energy of the tremor dissipates through the countless joints and curves. It is a principle modern engineers only rediscovered in the 20th century, calling it seismic flexibility. The Incas knew it centuries earlier without formulas, only by intuition and experience. The precision in Inca architecture was not merely for engineering, it reflected a profound cosmic worldview. Many of their structures were aligned with celestial events, such as solstices, equinoxes, and the cycles of the moon. To the Inca, architecture was an extension of the heavens, and every stone in their walls was a star embodied upon the earth. The city of Cusco, the heart of the empire, was designed in the shape of a sacred puma, symbolizing power, courage, and protection. Arches, stairways, and linear pathways across the city were precisely oriented toward the rising and setting of the sun, allowing light to perform ceremonies of shadow and illumination on sacred days. To the Inca, stone was a living being called Huaca, a divine spirit residing within matter. They did not see stone as something to conquer, but as a companion in the act of creation, uniting humans, earth, sky, and stars into one harmonious whole. Centuries have passed, yet modern science still cannot recreate how the Inca fitted their massive stones with less than a millimeter of deviation, without mortar or metal tools. Did they possess a lost technology or inherit knowledge from a forgotten civilization? Whatever the truth, the walls remain silent, hiding their secrets within every joint of stone. As the sun sets over Sacsayhuaman, light glimmers on the granite surface like polished metal, echoing a timeless question. How did the Inca cut, move, and fit these stones without leaving a single trace. Among the windswept steppes of Eurasia, beneath the frozen soil and endless grasslands, archaeologists have uncovered one of the most extraordinary burial traditions of the ancient world, the chariot burials of the Scythians. These graves, belonging to a nomadic people who once ruled the steppe from the Black Sea to Siberia, reveal a world of spiritual grandeur, violent rituals, and mysteries that still defy explanation after more than 2 millennia. The Scythians were known to the Greeks as fierce horseman archers who seemed born in the saddle, a civilization without cities, but with unshakable pride. Yet beneath their image as wild nomads lay a culture of remarkable sophistication. Their burial sites, discovered across Ukraine, southern Russia, and Central Asia, show not chaos, but order, symbolism, and meticulous ritual. And at the heart of these rituals lies a haunting image, a warrior or noble lying in eternal slumber beside his horses and his war chariot, ready to ride once more beyond the veil of death. Were these chariot burials made for kings' warriors, or something far more spiritual? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you believe truly lies behind this ancient mystery. The chariot in Scythian belief was not merely a tool of war, it was a sacred vessel. When a chieftain or elite warrior died, his people would construct a deep burial chamber, often beneath a grand kurgan mound, rising above the steppe. Inside they placed not only the body of the deceased, but also his 2- or 4-wheeled chariot, accompanied by horses, sacrificed and positioned as if ready to charge forward. These horses were not symbolic figures carved from stone or clay. They were real animals, carefully adorned with harnesses of gold and silver, their bodies arranged with ceremonial precision. Some still wore their bits reins and decorative gear. Even after thousands of years, traces of their braided manes and preserved leather straps remain. It is as though in the Scythian mind, the chariot was the key to crossing into the next world, and the horses were the sacred beings that would carry their master through the eternal plains of the afterlife. When these tombs were first uncovered in places like the Altai Mountains, the Dnieper River Valley, and the plains of Kazakhstan, archaeologists were stunned. The burial chambers were filled with gold jewelry, intricate weaponry, and richly decorated objects. Swords with zoomorphic hilts, golden plaques depicting griffins and stags, and delicate fabrics embroidered with animal motifs. Each artifact told a story of power, of identity, of myth. The Scythians believed that animals represented spiritual guardians, the stag symbolized rebirth, the eagle divine vision, and the panther ferocity in battle. The golden ornaments that once adorned the warrior's clothing and his horses shimmered like captured sunlight, a reflection of divine favor. But alongside these treasures lay something darker, the evidence of human and animal sacrifice. Some graves contained the bodies of attendants, wives, or servants, all buried alongside the main figure. In some cases, the skeletons were found in sitting positions, their necks broken as if killed moments before burial. Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century before the Common Era, left one of the most chilling accounts of Scythian funerary customs. When a great king died, he wrote his body was embalmed and carried across the land so that every tribe could pay their respects. A year later, a great ceremony was held. Dozens of horses and servants were sacrificed, and their bodies placed around the royal tomb, mounted upright to mimic the living guard of a monarch in death. Modern excavations have confirmed much of Herodotus's story. In several sites, archaeologists found circles of sacrifice horses arranged around a central burial mound as if standing watch. The precision and repetition of these arrangements suggest that the Scythians practiced a highly organized, almost religiously codified rite of death, a ritual that fused brutality with transcendence. In the remote Altai Mountains, the permafrost preserved several Scythian tombs in astonishing detail. The Pazyryk burials, as they are known, have yielded mummified bodies with tattoos still visible on their skin, depicting mythic beasts, creatures that blended the bodies of stags, lions, and eagles. The chariots themselves, though made of wood, survived in the ice-spoked wheels, axle parts, and leather harnesses perfectly intact. For the first time, archaeologists could see not only what Scythian chariots looked like, but how they were arranged in the tombs. Each wheel pointed eastward, the direction of the rising sun symbol of rebirth. Each horse's head faced the same way. Every detail spoke of a belief in cosmic order, the rhythm of life, death, and renewal. The chariot burials reveal that the Scythians were far from primitive. They possessed a structured hierarchy where only the elite king's chiefs and perhaps high-ranking warriors were buried with such grandeur. Yet in several tombs, archaeologists made a startling discovery: some of these chariot burials belonged to women. These women were not buried as passive companions, but as warriors. They were found with bows, quivers of arrows, spears, and battle gear. Their bones bore signs of combat-healed fractures, arrow wounds, and strong upper body musculature. It was undeniable these women had fought, commanded, and died as soldiers. This discovery ignited an age-old debate. Were these the legendary Amazons of Greek myth? Ancient Greek writers often described a mysterious tribe of female warriors living beyond the Black Sea, fierce horsewomen who rivaled men in battle. Could the Scythian chariot burials be the real-world echoes of that legend? Or were these women part of a spiritual class, priestesses entrusted with the sacred chariot rituals? This is where the greatest mystery lies. Who were the people buried with these chariots? Were they all elite warriors and nobles, or something far more symbolic? Some scholars believe that the chariot itself represented the sun's vehicle, and those buried with it were chosen as the divine riders who would escort the sun god across the sky. Others suggest the chariot was a symbol of royal power, and its burial was an act of sealing that power away, preventing it from being misused by the living. Then there is the question of the women. If they were warriors, their presence rewrites much of what we thought we knew about gender and warfare in the ancient world. If they were priestesses, then their graves hint at a lost Scythian religion, centered around solar deities and celestial journeys, a faith that left no written word, only golden relics and the silent geometry of burial mounds. And finally, why destroy something so valuable? To bury a functional chariot, the peak of Scythian craftsmanship, along with living horses and gold, was to sacrifice immense wealth. For a nomadic people who prized mobility, this act seems paradoxical. It suggests that for the Scythians, death was not an end, but a continuation, a passage that required all the instruments of earthly glory. As the winds sweep over the empty steppes, the Scythian kurgans still rise like small mountains against the horizon. Beneath them lie the silent chariots, the horses frozen in motion, and the warriors, men and women alike, waiting for the call of the eternal hunt. Their world has vanished, their language lost, yet their graves speak a language all humans understand: a yearning for power, for remembrance, for a journey that never ends. And somewhere among those bones, gold trinkets and wooden wheels, lies the haunting question that refuses to die. Who truly rests beside these chariots? A king, a warrior, a priestess, or perhaps a spirit meant to ride forever through the unending steppe between life and death? Beneath the blazing sun of the ancient Mediterranean, where golden waves kissed the shores of Alexandria, there once rose a tower so tall it seemed to touch the heavens, the legendary Lighthouse of Pharos. To approaching sailors, Its fiery crown was a promise of safety. To kings and scholars, it was a symbol of mankind's mastery over nature itself. Built more than 2 millennia ago, this towering marvel defied the limits of its time, a beacon of science, ambition, and mystery. Even today, as its stones sleep beneath the sea, the lost Roman lighthouse of Pharos still calls out through history, daring us to uncover how ancient hands built the impossible. Do you think ancient engineers truly mastered techniques we can't replicate today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theory about how they built the impossible. This lighthouse was built around the 3rd century BCE under the reign of Ptolemy II, Philadelphus of Egypt. At that time, Alexandria was the beating heart of the Greco-Roman world, a hub of philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and maritime trade. But despite its grandeur, ships approaching the coast faced deadly risks from reef fog and unpredictable tides. That is why Ptolemy II ordered the construction of a massive tower on the small island of Pharos, a beacon to guide sailors safely home. The word Pharos later became a generic term for all lighthouses around the world, a linguistic legacy that endures to this day. According to ancient records, Pharos stood between 110 and 140 meters tall, equivalent to a modern 30-story building. Its structure was remarkably unique, a solid square base like a fortress, an octagonal middle section rising toward the heavens, and a cylindrical tower at the top where an immense flame burned day and night. Inside, a spiraling ramp allowed horses to haul timber and fuel to the summit. The design was a perfect fusion of Greek geometry, Egyptian craftsmanship, and Roman organizational brilliance, a masterpiece thousands of years ahead of its time. At the tower's peak, a massive bronze mirror reflected the firelight, reportedly visible from over 50 kilometers out to sea. Some Arabic manuscripts claim that the reflected rays were powerful enough to burn enemy ships, a kind of primitive optical weapon. While modern scholars often dismiss this as exaggeration, no one can deny that such an advanced system of light projection was extraordinary for its era. Pharos was more than a navigational structure. It was a monument to power and intellect. From its base, one could see the great port of Alexandria, where ships from across the ancient world gathered from Greece, Rome, Carthage, India, and even the far reaches of the Red Sea. Merchants, philosophers, and scholars arriving at the harbor gazed up at its blazing light, a symbol of civilization and prosperity. Alongside the Library of Alexandria, the lighthouse stood as one of the 2 great pillars of ancient knowledge illuminating the glory of the Ptolemaic age. Yet like all wonders, its magnificence did not last forever. For centuries, Pharos endured storms and wars until a series of devastating earthquakes between the 11th and 14th centuries finally brought it down. The enormous stones crashed into the sea, and silence fell over the centuries. When the Mamluks built the Qaitbay fortress in the 15th century, they reused those very same stones as if history had been reborn from the ruins. Still, even in its destruction, the legend of Pharos continued to echo across the Mediterranean. In 1994, a French archaeological team, led by Jean-Yves Empereur, discovered hundreds of granite blocks, statues of pharaohs, and massive bronze fragments beneath the Bay of Alexandria. Some of these artifacts bore architectural markings identical to Arabic descriptions of the ancient lighthouse. These discoveries suggest that the true remains of pharaohs still rest quietly beneath the cold waters of the Mediterranean, awaiting rediscovery. Although a modern 3-dimensional reconstruction project was once proposed, technical and political obstacles have kept it forever suspended between legend and history. No mystery surrounding the ancient world captivates the imagination quite like the construction of the Lighthouse of Pharos. More than 2,000 years ago, engineers somehow managed to erect a tower over 140 meters tall on a small island surrounded by shifting sands and restless waves without cranes, steel, or modern tools. How could such a feat be possible? Each stone of the lighthouse weighed several tons, yet these colossal blocks were transported across water from the mainland to Pharos Island with astonishing precision. Some scholars propose that ancient builders constructed a massive causeway or a floating wooden bridge, allowing oxen and workers to drag the stones during low tide. Others envision vast wooden cranes and pulley systems powered by counterweights, a technology centuries ahead of its time. But even these explanations struggle to justify how they lifted and aligned thousands of heavy blocks with perfect balance against fierce sea winds. Perhaps the secret lies in a lost combination of mathematics, geometry, and sheer human ingenuity knowledge that vanished with the collapse of Alexandria's golden age, leaving only questions shimmering beneath the waves. The mystery was not just about weight, it was about structural stability. With such height and constant sea winds battering it, even a small error could have caused immediate collapse. Yet Pharos stood firm for over 16 centuries. This indicates that ancient engineers possessed deep knowledge of balanced stress distribution and load-bearing design principles that Europe would not formalize until the Middle Ages. One of the greatest enigmas of the Lighthouse of Pharos lies in its bronze mirror said to project light across the Mediterranean for tens of kilometers. To achieve such power, the builders would have needed a remarkable understanding of optics and reflective geometry far beyond what history credits them with. Some researchers believe the mirror was parabolic in shape, precisely curved to focus light, much like the lenses of modern lighthouses. Others suggest that its alignment relied on the sun's position adjusted daily by skilled astronomers and engineers. But how could ancient craftsmen forge and polish a bronze surface of such immense size and accuracy without the tools we possess today? The Mirror of Pharos remains a puzzle shimmering between science and legend, proof that ancient minds may have understood the laws of light in ways we have only begun to rediscover. When the Roman Empire took control of Egypt, they preserved and replicated the design of Pharos in several locations at Ostia, the harbor of Rome, and at Dover on the English coast. Yet none of these copies matched the grandeur and precision of the original, leading many to believe that the construction secrets of Pharos perished with the engineers of Alexandria. Perhaps they had blended the best of Greek, Egyptian, and Roman methods, knowledge passed down orally but never recorded in written form. Today, scientists continue to explore the seabed of Alexandria in search of clues. Sonar scans of the area reveal traces of a three-tiered foundation system, matching the descriptions of ancient writers. Several digital reconstruction projects have recreated Pharos in glowing light, its brilliance once again shining across the virtual sea. Yet no matter how advanced technology becomes, the true secret of how Pharos was built remains just out of reach. Did the ancients possess technological wisdom far beyond what we imagine? Or was it simply the result of relentless human determination and faith during an age of boundless ambition? Perhaps like the beacon that once lit the night sea, the answer still gleams somewhere within the depths of history, waiting to be rediscovered. Though the Lighthouse of Pharos has long vanished, it still lives on in human memory as a symbol of our desire to conquer the impossible. Between desert and sea, ancient builders erected a monument so magnificent that even modern civilization must bow in admiration. And perhaps, within the stones buried beneath the sands of Alexandria Bay, still lies the secret of how humans once reached for the sky, with bare hands, with intellect, and with the unshakable belief that light can guide us through every age. Will we ever uncover all the secrets of Pharos, or will it forever remain the eternal flame of the unknown illuminating humanity's endless curiosity. Across the isolated Pacific, more than 2,000 miles from any mainland, rises one of humanity's most haunting mysteries, the Moai statues of Easter Island or Rapa Nui. Carved centuries ago from volcanic tuff, these colossal figures stand as silent witnesses to a vanished civilization. But beyond their sheer size and eerie presence, there is an even deeper enigma that has baffled archaeologists for generations: the placement of their massive red stone hats known as pukao. Each one weighs over 10 tons, carved from a different quarry miles away, and yet somehow they were lifted and balanced with impossible precision atop statues already towering several meters tall. How could a society without metal tools, without wheels, and without beasts of burden achieve such a feat? How do you think the Rapa Nui people managed to place those massive red hats, each weighing many tons, on top of the Moai statues? Was it through engineering ritual or something beyond our understanding? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For the people of Rapa Nui, the Moai were not mere sculptures. They were living embodiments of ancestors' vessels, channeling a sacred energy known as mana. Each statue faced inland, guarding the villages, protecting their descendants through a mysterious force that bound the world of the living with that of the dead. Yet even among these sacred figures, those crowned with a red hat stood apart. The red stone symbolized vitality, power, and divinity. In many Polynesian cultures, the color red was the essence of the sacred, the blood of life itself. To wear red was to be touched by the gods. Thus, placing the pukao upon the Moai was not a simple act of decoration. It was a ritual of empowerment, a ceremony through which stone was granted spiritual life. But the mystery begins long before the hats reached the statues. The red pukao were quarried from a site called Punapau, a small crater rich in a soft scarlet volcanic rock known as scoria. This quarry lies roughly 12 kilometers away from the main site of Rano Raraku, where the bodies of the Moai were carved. The journey between them would have been treacherous, rugged volcanic terrain, uneven slopes, and no roads. To transport even a single pukao weighing 10 tons would have required an astonishing degree of coordination and ingenuity. Archaeologists have found pathways carved into the island's landscape, suggesting the ancient Rapa Nui rolled these cylinders using a combination of logs and ropes. But the absence of large trees on the island at the time raises further doubts. Where did the wood come from? How did they prevent the fragile scoria from cracking under such strain? Once the pukao reached their destinations, a greater challenge awaited raising them. The Moai statues themselves often exceeded 7 meters in height and were already placed upright on ceremonial platforms known as ahu. The act of lifting a 10-ton red cylinder onto the narrow, uneven top of a vertical stone colossus without cranes or pulleys defies modern logic. Various hypotheses have emerged over the years, each attempting to explain what seems mechanically impossible. Some archaeologists propose the ramp theory that the Rapa Nui built sloping ramps of stone and soil up to the statue's head, dragging the pukao into place using ropes. This might seem plausible, yet the evidence is thin. No traces of such massive ramps have survived, and the amount of material needed would have been immense, far beyond the island's resources. Others suggest the rolling theory, in which the pukao shaped as cylinders were rolled up inclined surfaces or even spiral ramps encircling the Moai. Marks resembling grooves have been found on some pukao, as if ropes were once wound tightly around them. Could these grooves have served a practical purpose, a way to pull the stone upward, turning it like a screw until it reached the top? Or were they purely symbolic, representing a spiritual spiral of energy ascending from the earth to the heavens? Modern experiments have tried to replicate the feat. In one famous reconstruction by a team from the University of Manchester, engineers used ropes, logs, and manpower to test the ramp hypothesis. Even with safety equipment and controlled conditions, raising a replica Pukao, only a fraction of the original size, proved nearly impossible. The delicate balance required to seat the stone precisely atop the statue's flat crown left no room for error. A single slip would have shattered both stones and crushed anyone nearby. Yet somehow, centuries ago, the Rapa Nui did it repeatedly, dozens of times, with near-perfect precision. This leads to one of the most haunting questions in archaeology. How did they know it could be done? Was there a forgotten technique? A ritualized method passed down orally through generations, now lost to time? Or did faith itself provide the strength and unity needed to accomplish the impossible? There are more mysterious details. On several fallen Pukao, archaeologists discovered spiral patterns and carved indentations that might once have held ropes or wooden beams. These features hint that the Rapa Nui understood advanced mechanical principles, friction counterweight, rotational leverage concepts we associate with classical engineering. Yet there is no record of such knowledge elsewhere in Polynesian prehistory. Could it be that Rapa Nui developed a unique, isolated science of stone movement, one that disappeared when their society collapsed? Others interpret the evidence through a spiritual lens. The act of raising the Pukao might not have been purely mechanical, but ceremonial, a communal performance that merged engineering with faith. The islanders believed their ancestors' spirits inhabited the Moai, guiding the people through unseen forces. To lift the Pukao was to crown the ancestor with power, an offering of strength and continuity. The difficulty of the task may have been the point only through collective devotion could the community achieve it, proving their unity and belief in the sacred order of the world. Yet despite these symbolic interpretations, the physical question remains unanswered. The largest Pukao weighs nearly 12 tons and measures over 2 meters in diameter. Even if ramps or levers were used, how did the Rapa Nui maintain stability and accuracy while lifting such a mass onto a curved surface? Computer models suggest that balancing such a weight, even slightly off-center, would cause the stone to slide off immediately. Precision of that level demands knowledge of geometry, counterbalancing, and coordination at a scale that seems astonishing for a Neolithic society. Some fringe theorists, of course, invoke extraterrestrial intervention, the ancient aliens explanation, arguing that the Rapa Nui could not have achieved this without outside help. While mainstream archaeology dismisses this notion, it reflects how profoundly the Pukao puzzle challenges our understanding of human capability. The truth may be less cosmic, yet no less extraordinary. A small island, people isolated from the rest of the world, developed the will, discipline, and unity to perform feats that still defy modern replication. When European explorers first arrived in the 18th century, many Moai had already been toppled, their Pukao lying scattered across the ground. Some fell from earthquakes, others from internal conflict when rival clans destroyed each other's statues. Yet even in ruin, the presence of those red crowns evokes awe. They are reminders not only of the islanders' lost skill, but of their devotion, an unbroken link between stone spirit and the boundless imagination of humankind. Standing before a Moai crowned with a red hat is to face a paradox. The stone is silent, yet it tells the story of human ambition. Their craftsmanship was ancient, yet precise, as if from the future. How did they do it? Perhaps the secret of the Pukao lies not only in engineering, but in faith and unity, the power to lift mountains and create wonders. The red hats of Rapa Nui are not mere relics of the past, but eternal witnesses to humanity's will to transcend its limits. Hidden deep within the Peruvian Andes, at over 3,000 meters above sea level, lies one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in South America, Chavin de Huantar. To the casual traveler, it might look like nothing more than an ancient collection of stone temples and tunnels. But to historians, archaeologists, and mystics alike, it is a puzzle, a masterpiece of architecture and symbolism that seems far too advanced for the era in which it was built. Beneath its silent stones lingers a question that has haunted researchers for generations: who truly built Chavin, and for what purpose? If a civilization over 2,500 years ago was capable of building something so sophisticated, far beyond the knowledge of their time, then who do you think truly created Chavin de Huantar? Was it ancient humans with lost knowledge, or could it have been another civilization, perhaps even something not of this earth, that left their mark here? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this mystery. When you first arrive, the air itself feels different, thin, cold, and almost sacred. The ruins sit perfectly between two rivers, the Mosna and the Wacheksa, a natural meeting point between the Andean highlands and the Amazon basin. It is a place where the mountains meet the jungle, where two ecosystems and perhaps two worlds touch. Archaeologists believe the location was deliberately chosen for its energetic convergence. The Chavin people saw mountains as living gods, rivers as veins of the earth, and stone as a sacred medium that could store the voices of spirits. To them, Chavin was not just a temple, it was a portal, a gateway between the human and the divine. Beneath the visible ruins lies a labyrinth of underground tunnels, corridors, and chambers carved from massive stone blocks, each one fitted together with uncanny precision. There is no mortar, no visible tool marks, yet the stones interlock perfectly even after more than 2 millennia of earthquakes. These tunnels twist and loop in ways that defy logic, often leading to small hidden rooms where the air grows still and sound transforms into strange echoes. Some believe these spaces were used for meditation or initiation rituals. Others think they were designed to manipulate the senses, altering sound, light, and perception to induce spiritual experiences. When modern researchers began to test the acoustics of these passages, they discovered something extraordinary. The architecture itself seems to have been designed for sound. Deep tones, played through conch shell trumpets, known as pututus, reverberate through the stone corridors in haunting animal-like roars. The vibrations travel in unpredictable ways, creating the illusion that voices are emerging from the walls themselves. Imagine standing in the darkness, surrounded by echoes that growl and whisper, believing, as ancient pilgrims once did, that the gods were speaking to you. Some scientists have even called Chavin the first acoustic cathedral in human history. Everywhere you look, symbols of transformation cover the walls: carved serpents winding through stone jaguar faces, merging with human ones, eagles spreading their wings in eternal flight. These images form part of a complex religious iconography that represented power, life, death, and rebirth. At the very center of the labyrinth stands the Lanzon, a towering granite monolith carved with a hybrid deity, human body, feline fangs, serpent hair, and spiral eyes. Its placement deep within the tunnels, illuminated only by a shaft of light from above, suggests that it was the heart of the Chavin cult, the axis where heaven, earth, and the underworld converged. What astonishes archaeologists is not only the art itself, but the level of scientific knowledge encoded within the site. The temples and galleries of Chavin align precisely with solar and stellar patterns. During solstices, specific shafts of light penetrate through narrow openings to illuminate sacred carvings. The drainage system beneath the temple was so advanced that it could redirect water flow to create roaring sounds, possibly used to simulate the voice of deities during ceremonies. Such mastery of engineering, astronomy, and acoustics seems almost impossible for a culture that flourished over 2,500 years ago. But the mystery deepens further when we consider what kind of rituals took place here. Many artifacts found at Chavin, including engraved tablets and cactus-shaped ceremonial vessels, suggest the use of psychoactive plants such as the San Pedro cactus. Those who consumed it would experience vivid hallucinations accompanied by the overwhelming sensory manipulation of sound, darkness, and vibration within the tunnels. In that altered state, surrounded by the echoing growls of conch shells and the faces of jaguars carved in stone, participants may have felt themselves crossing into another dimension. Was this how the priests of Chavin communed with their gods through carefully engineered sensory transformation? And yet, amid all these wonders, the greatest mystery remains unsolved. Who truly built Chavin de Huantar? Officially, it is attributed to the Chavin culture, which flourished between 1200 and 500 BCE. But when archaeologists date the stones and analyze the precision of the construction, they find inconsistencies. The engineering sophistication, the alignment to celestial cycles, and the acoustic mastery seem far beyond the known capabilities of early Andean societies. Some researchers even speculate that Chavin may have been built upon an older unknown foundation, a legacy from a forgotten civilization that predated recorded Andean history. There are strange clues that support this idea. Some carvings appear older and more eroded than the rest, suggesting multiple phases of occupation. Others depict creatures and symbols not native to the Andes: crocodiles, tropical fish, and birds from the Amazon basin, as if the builders possessed knowledge of distant regions long before organized trade routes existed. Even the style of the lanzon, with its fusion of animal and human forms, resembles art found thousands of kilometers away in Mesoamerica. Could Chavin be the remnant of a lost cultural network, one that connected early civilizations across the Americas? Then there are the stone-cutting techniques themselves. The precision of certain blocks, their smooth surfaces, tight joints, and deliberate orientation reminds some scholars of the megalithic craftsmanship seen in sites like Tiwanaku or even the pyramids of Egypt. Yet there are no written records, no inscriptions, no evidence of tools that could explain such mastery. It is as if Chavin appeared suddenly fully formed, like a monument inherited rather than created. Legends from local Quechua traditions speak of beings of light who descended from the mountains, teaching humanity how to shape stone and channel the forces of nature. Others describe Chavin as the dwelling of the children of the stars who left before humanity could understand their purpose. To some, these are just myths, but to others, they are whispers of a forgotten truth. Archaeologists have tried to reconstruct the original purpose of Chavin, but the evidence points in multiple directions. Was it a temple, a university of science and ritual, an initiation chamber for priests and rulers, or was it something older, a technology of the spirit built to amplify consciousness itself? The site's sudden abandonment only adds to the enigma. Around 200 BCE, the complex was mysteriously sealed. Chambers were filled with debris, entrances blocked, and altars buried under stone. There are no signs of war or destruction, only deliberate closure, as if the last priests wanted to lock away a power too dangerous to remain open. Since then, Chavin has stood silent, its secrets buried beneath centuries of dust and myth. Today, researchers using 3D scans continue to uncover hidden chambers, strange alignments and symbols, mapping both the sky and the human mind. Each discovery deepens the mystery. Was Chavin a product of ancient genius or a relic of a vanished civilization? Walking its stone halls feels transformative, as if it were built to awaken something within us. The question still echoes: who truly built Chavin de Huantar, and what knowledge have we forgotten? On the northern coast of Ireland, where the Atlantic crashes against dark cliffs and mist curls across the horizon, there lies a place that seems to defy the ordinary rules of nature. The Giant's Causeway is one of those rare landscapes where the line between geology and art, between natural creation and divine architecture, becomes almost impossible to distinguish. At first glance, it appears to be the work of some ancient civilization, a massive pathway of tens of thousands of interlocking basalt columns stretching from the land straight into the sea. But step closer, and you realize these formations are not the remains of a forgotten empire, nor the relics of a mythic god's workshop. They are the result of natural forces so immense, so precise, that they seem almost beyond belief. When you see tens of thousands of perfectly shaped basalt columns stretching out into the sea, do you believe this is truly a product of nature? Or could it be a structure marked by some ancient greater force? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every perspective might reveal a completely new way to understand this mysterious wonder. The story of the Giant's Causeway begins around 50 to 60 million years ago, during a period of intense volcanic activity that reshaped much of what we now call Northern Ireland. Streams of molten basalt erupted from deep fissures in the earth, pouring across the surface like rivers of fire. As this fiery liquid spread and cooled, it began to contract and crack, just as mud does when it dries in the sun. But instead of random fractures, the lava formed patterns of astonishing geometric perfection, mostly six-sided columns, though some have 4, 5, or even 7 sides. Each column locked tightly against its neighbor, creating a tessellated surface so flawless that it looks almost engineered. There are over 40,000 individual columns, packed together along the coast, each one shaped like a hexagonal prism. Most stand about 30 to 40 centimeters wide, though some reach heights of up to 12 meters. When viewed from above, they resemble an enormous mosaic, as if some giant hand had carved them one by one with mathematical precision. The sheer uniformity of their design is what makes the Giant's Causeway one of the most extraordinary natural wonders on Earth. Even scientists who understand the volcanic process admit that its perfection borders on the surreal. Imagine walking down toward the shoreline. The ocean air smells of salt and rain, and beneath your feet is a pathway made of endless stone columns, each one fitting so neatly into the next that no blade of grass can grow between them. The surface rises and falls like frozen waves, and when you reach the edge, the columns vanish into the sea, as if continuing toward another world beneath the water. It is said that from certain angles, the causeway looks like a stairway descending into the ocean, a road built for giants, or perhaps a bridge between realms. According to Irish legend, the giant Fionn MacCumhaill, Finn McCool, built the stone bridge to reach Scotland and challenge his rival, Benandonnair. Realizing his opponent's size, Finn disguised himself as a baby. Terrified by the child's size, Benandonnair fled in panic, destroying the bridge, leaving behind the Giant's Causeway we see today. Yet even stripped of legend, the site retains a sense of the supernatural. The basalt columns rise in uneven tiers, forming platform steps and terraces that seem sculpted for a grand forgotten purpose. Some sections have been given names by the locals: the Giant's Boot, shaped like an enormous footprint; the Organ, where vertical columns resemble the pipes of a cathedral instrument; and the Wishing Chair, a seat of polished basalt that has been worn smooth by centuries of visitors seeking good fortune. Every formation feels deliberate, as though nature itself was following a hidden architectural plan. Scientists have long tried to understand how such order could emerge from chaos. The process of columnar jointing, as it is technically called, occurs when thick lava flows cools slowly and uniformly, allowing stress cracks to spread evenly through the rock. But at Giant's Causeway, the level of consistency is unprecedented. The hexagonal shapes extend for hundreds of meters with barely a flaw in alignment. Even modern experiments attempting to reproduce these conditions rarely achieve such perfection. Some researchers have suggested that subtle differences in cooling rate pressure and mineral composition may have combined to create an ideal crystallization environment. Others believe magnetic fields or ancient tidal rhythms might have influenced the fracture patterns, but none of these theories fully capture why the geometry of the causeway feels so intentional, so conscious. It is this almost mathematical elegance that makes the Giant's Causeway feel less like a natural formation and more like a message from the planet itself. Standing among those stones, one can't help but feel the pulse of time, the way heat pressure and chemistry once conspired to carve a perfect pattern from chaos. The Earth, in a moment of creative fury, had built something that humans would later mistake for art. Beyond its beauty and legend, the Giant's Causeway is also a scientific treasure trove. The site preserves layers of volcanic and sedimentary rock that reveal the violent geological history of the North Atlantic. Its structure has helped researchers understand how continents drifted apart, how volcanic systems evolved, and how thermal contraction can shape matter on both microscopic and planetary scales. And yet, for all the research, the most haunting question remains unanswered. Why here, and why so perfect? When UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 1986, it wasn't merely for its scientific value, but for its ability to bridge myth and reality. The Giant's Causeway stands as both geological evidence and cultural symbol, a place where the imagination of an island nation met the unyielding power of nature. It tells two stories at once, one written by fire and stone, and another whispered by folklore through the centuries. The deeper you look, the more those stories intertwine. Perhaps Fion's footsteps were simply the Earth's volcanic rhythm recorded in rock. Or perhaps the legend arose because people sensed, even subconsciously, that no mere accident of lava could create such disciplined artistry. Whether seen as the work of giants or the handiwork of geological forces, the causeway endures as proof that perfection exists in nature, though we may never fully understand it. Standing there at the edge of the Atlantic, you are dwarfed by the columns rising around you, ancient, silent, exact. Each hexagon fits into the next, like a cosmic puzzle, repeating endlessly, an echo of the same geometry found in honeycombs, snowflakes, and even the structure of atoms. It is as if the universe itself left its signature here, etched in basalt. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. For every explanation we devise, the Giant's Causeway continues to remind us that nature is both scientist and sculptor, capable of logic and beauty in equal measure. It doesn't merely tell the story of a volcano that cooled millions of years ago. It tells us something profound about the nature of creation itself. So the next time you see its endless hexagons vanishing into the sea, remember these stones are not random. They are the frozen mathematics of the Earth, shaped in fire, cooled by time, and arranged with a precision that even the greatest human architects can only imitate. The Giant's Causeway is more than a landscape. It is a message carved in stone, a testament to the mysterious harmony between chaos and order that defines our world. Among all the pyramids that rise across the sands of Egypt, few evoke as much mystery and melancholy as the Black Pyramid of El Lahun. At first glance, it seems to be a ruin, a dark, crumbling mound of clay, standing in the shadow of greater monuments like Giza or Saqqara. Yet beneath its weathered surface lies a structure that defies expectation, both in design and in precision. Built during Egypt's Middle Kingdom under the reign of Pharaoh Senusret II around 1840 BCE, this enigmatic pyramid tells a story not of glory and perfection, but of innovation, secrecy, and forgotten genius. While the Great Pyramid of Khufu dazzles with its luminous white limestone and massive scale, El Lahun stands in stark contrast, dark, eroded, and seemingly fragile. Its nickname, the Black Pyramid, comes from the dark hue of its core materials, mud brick mixed with straw, a humble substance that time has not been kind to. The white limestone casing that once covered it has long since vanished, leaving the inner mass exposed to centuries of desert wind and sun. From afar, it resembles a blackened relic, as though scorched by time itself. But appearances deceive. Beneath its decay lies a level of engineering precision that rivals and in some ways surpasses its more famous predecessors. Do you believe the extraordinary accuracy of El Lahun was simply the result of advanced observation and mathematics, or could it suggest the Egyptians possessed a form of lost knowledge we have yet to rediscover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The first thing that astonishes modern archaeologists is not its size or grandeur, but how precisely it was built despite being made of such weak materials. Mud brick, unlike stone, is susceptible to erosion, compression, and shifting. Yet somehow, the builders of El Lahun managed to construct a pyramid that adhered with astronomical accuracy to the cardinal points north, south, east, and west. The alignment of its corridors and internal chambers deviates by mere minutes of arc from true north. To put that into perspective, this degree of precision rivals the Great Pyramid itself, which was built from millions of limestone blocks weighing tons each. How could ancient engineers achieve such accuracy when working with perishable materials? The answer may lie in the mathematical and astronomical sophistication of Middle Kingdom Egypt. Senusret II's architects likely used observations of stars such as Sirius, the Dog Star, and Ursa Major, employing sighting rods and shadow measurements to determine true north. Even more remarkable is that these measurements had to be transferred accurately onto a foundation of clay, a medium far less stable than stone. Every miscalculation risked collapse, yet the builders executed it flawlessly. This paradox, a fragile structure built with almost supernatural precision, forms the heart of El Lahun's enduring mystery. Beneath the surface, the precision becomes even more astonishing. Instead of following the conventional layout of earlier pyramids with entrances on the north face, the true entrance of El Lahun lies concealed beneath a nearby tomb belonging to a royal woman. This unconventional placement suggests deliberate misdirection, as though the builders intended to deceive tomb robbers. But it also reveals a deeper level of spatial understanding. The underground network is a labyrinth of corridors, false passages, and sealed chambers, all meticulously measured and aligned. Some tunnels were built merely to mislead, while others lead to perfectly proportioned rooms lined with polished stone. Even with modern mapping, archaeologists still find it difficult to understand the geometric logic of its internal plan. Every angle, every corridor seems calculated to maintain both symmetry and astronomical orientation, a level of planning that required not only architectural brilliance but also profound knowledge of geometry and celestial motion. Constructing a pyramid from mud brick posed immense challenges. Unlike stone, mud brick could not bear great weight for long periods, especially in a structure as massive as a pyramid. To compensate, engineers devised a core framework reinforced by stone corridors and massive foundation slabs. This hybrid approach, mud brick for bulk, stone for support, demonstrates a remarkable understanding of load distribution and material behavior. Over 3,800 years later, parts of the pyramid still stand. Though the outer layers have crumbled, the internal design remains legible, a silent testament to the precision of its original planning. The fact that the structure has survived at all through millennia of floods, erosion, and earthquakes speaks volumes about the builders' foresight. They didn't simply stack bricks, they engineered resilience into every angle using techniques we still study today. The pyramid's orientation toward the stars was no accident. In Egyptian belief, the journey to the afterlife was a cosmic voyage. The pharaoh's soul was thought to ascend to the heavens and join the imperishable stars. The builders of El Lahun took this concept literally. Researchers have discovered that certain passageways align with the rising of Sirius Sopdet, a star associated with the goddess Isis and the annual flooding of the Nile. This connection between astronomy, agriculture, and divinity was central to Egyptian cosmology. The precision alignment of the pyramid, despite its simple materials, reflects the belief that even clay and mud could be instruments of eternal harmony if built according to cosmic law. In this sense, El Lahun is more than a tomb. It is a celestial instrument calibrated to the heavens. The pharaoh's eternal home was also a mathematical model of the universe. Perhaps the most haunting mystery of all, no royal mummy was ever found inside. Despite decades of excavation, no trace of Senusrettu's body or burial goods has been recovered from the pyramid itself. Some believe the tomb was plundered in antiquity. Others suggest that the pharaoh was buried elsewhere entirely, and that El Lahun served a purely ritual purpose, a symbolic gateway between life and death. If this is true, then the pyramid's extraordinary precision was not for physical preservation, but spiritual alignment, a machine for the soul rather than the body. Its accuracy in orientation may have been intended to guide the king's Ka spirit through the stars with unerring direction. Around the pyramid lies the ancient town of Kahun, a settlement built specifically for the workers and priests who maintained the royal complex. Excavations have revealed papyri, wooden tools, and intricate jewelry, all made with the same obsessive precision that defines the pyramid itself. Curiously, among these artifacts were symbols and inscriptions that don't match standard Egyptian hieroglyphs, enigmatic marks that some scholars believe could be proto-engineering codes or astronomical notations. If true, this suggests that the builders of El Lahun operated with a scientific mindset far ahead of their time, calculating stress points, sun angles, and star risings to perfect their design. Over the centuries, the pyramid's outer casing crumbled away, leaving a dark, skeletal form that looms over the Fayum Depression like a dying monument. Travelers in the 19th century described it as a heap of ashes or a burnt mountain, and many believed it cursed. Even today, entering its corridors evokes unease, narrow walls, closing in air thick with dust, a silence that seems alive. Yet for those who look beyond the decay, El Lahun represents one of the greatest feats of ancient precision engineering. It challenges our assumptions about what was possible with primitive tools. It tells us that precision is not born from technology, but from intention. These ancient builders didn't need lasers or compasses. They had the stars and the wisdom to use them. Their instruments were patience, geometry, and faith. The Black Pyramid embodies contradiction. It is both fragile and eternal, crude and divine. Built from the earth itself, yet aligned with the heavens. Its engineers used mud and straw, yet achieved an accuracy that modern surveyors still marvel at. Perhaps that is why El Lahun continues to haunt us, not because it hides treasures or curses, but because it reflects something deeper, the human drive to seek perfection in imperfection, to reach for eternity with nothing but the materials of mortality. So what then was El Lahun meant to be? A tomb, a temple, a cosmic compass guiding the dead through the stars? Or was it, as some suspect, an experiment, a bridge between architecture and astronomy, between man and the divine? Whatever the answer, the Black Pyramid of El Lahun stands as proof that even in the age of clay and stone, precision could touch the infinite.